Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Armchair Aurora. My name is Mike Miller-Smith, the Chief Executive of Airability, which is a disabled flying charity which provides access to aviation for anyone with any disability in order to change lives and inspire ability, focusing on what people can do, not what they can't. Normally, at this time of year, we would be on an Airbus looking to the skies on a charity fundraising Aurora flight thanks to our friends and supporters at EasyJet. Tonight, however, we're going to take you on a journey of wonder from your living rooms and into the skies instead, using some amazing people and a network of cameras around the world. We're going to explore the workings of the Aurora, and we'll be talking to scientists, artists, and aviators about the Aurora, the skies, and some of the remotest places on Earth and even beyond. In a moment, I'll be introducing you to our wonderful hosts, the impressionist, comedian, keen amateur astronomer, and Airability ambassador, Mr. John Culshaw, and of course, the popular astronomer, Pete Lawrence, who also presents on the Sky at Night for the BBC and is a master of explaining astronomical phenomena in such an understandable and fun way. I'd like to thank them both for their support of Aurora flights in the past, as well as making the journey with us to Armchair Aurora. It was a crazy idea just a few weeks ago, and we've really pulled it together thanks to some amazing people. We couldn't do it without them. Thanks to the British Antarctic Survey, Sky at Night magazine, Aurora Live, the Aurora Borealis Observatory, GoStargazing.co.uk for supporting the Armchair Aurora, and a big hello to all of you watching on those channels. But before I hand over, I'd like to just show you a little bit more about Airability, just showing why we can make such a difference together. Airability exists to help disabled people change their lives through the magic of flight. Whatever the disability, whether it's a young person with autism or a wounded soldier, perhaps somebody with Alzheimer's even, or an acquired disability or medical condition, we give everybody the chance to participate and to fly with our specially adapted aircraft and equipment such as the hoist, which can safely lift somebody into the pilot seat to take the controls for the first time.
The one thing that's fantastic about Aerobility is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
When I'm up there, just another voice on the radio, and that's all I want to be, just another voice. And Airability has enabled that completely.
They gave me that purpose back, they gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
Time is tough for everybody right now, but if you can help, please do. Through your support, we can continue to change lives and support disabled people through the magic of flight. Thank you.
I am happier.
I am more confident.
I am feeling positive about my life.
Thanks to Airability.
And thank you to you.
Tonight's event is free for everyone, everywhere to watch. Our hope is that if you enjoy the show, that you might consider making a donation in support of disabled people doing something amazing to fly. It's very easy to do this. Just visit armchairaurora.com, where you can see how you can donate directly, or you can text FLY to 70490 to donate £5. Again, that's on the webpage. But perhaps the most fun thing to do is to visit our Aurora auction page running alongside this evening's event. You can bid for some amazing items, such as a visit for two to the Aurora Borealis Observatory in Norway, right up above the Arctic Circle. And there's also some exclusive signed memorabilia from our hosts. So that's armchairaurora.com. Thanks for your support. Enjoy the show. And over to John and Pete. Have a great evening, all.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike Miller-Smith. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and that wonderful insight into Airability. Fantastic charity, a fantastic organization, giving people with disabilities the chance to fly an aeroplane, which opens up all kinds of possibilities and wonderful sense of great possibility. So it's fantastic things that Airability achieves. And thank you for that wonderful introduction and for inviting us to be part of the show tonight. Whenever you phone, Mike, or wherever you email, we always know things are about to get interesting. And tonight, we shall be bringing the majesty of the Northern Lights to your home. We are going to be, we are monitoring many stations across the Arctic, across the auroral area. And if any live aurora takes place tonight, we will cross to it in a newsflash kind of way. And we shall bring this to you live as it takes place. We've got many webcams that we are monitoring closely. And as soon as it happens, we will click across to it. We're just running through some of them now. It looks like some very beautiful dusks, some purple twilight, and some wonderful scenes there. But as soon as the aurora flashes in, we will cross to it. We have our team monitoring all of these cameras to bring the aurora to your home today. We shall also be linking up with a wonderful Rothera, the wonderful Rothera research station in the Arctic, where they spend many, many months at a time doing very, very important research under magnificent, clear, starlit skies. So we should be teaming up with them. Also, we're talking to a very fascinating chap. I turn into Sir Patrick Moore then for a moment. We shall be talking to a very, very fascinating fellow, indeed, Nigel Meredith, who'll be talking through some of Earth's natural radio phenomena, the sounds created by the planet itself. You might be familiar with some of the sounds that Voyager picked up as it passed by Jupiter and Saturn, quite eerie sounds. The Earth has some of its own as well, which blend very well with an auroral setting. So Nigel Meredith has that later. And I think now we can cross to our first guest, a great pal of mine and a wonderful astronomical expert. Now, Pete Lawrence, are you there? Are you there, Pete? I've turned into Doctor Who's brigadier for no reason at all. Isn't it a moment for the router? The router always resets, doesn't it, at the crucial moment? My router is reset. Oh, my router is reset. Well, usually. Rightio. Yes, Peter, you see, I think this is the joy of a Zoom event, of a Zoom meeting. These things never run smoothly. That would just be too dull. That would just be too boring. Everybody in this lockdown time has been experiencing the joys of the way Zoom operates, things like this. It's a bit like freeform jazz. So you got to roll with it. That's what we've been doing for the last 14 months, and we're going to do it now. So hopefully Pete's router will unreset itself. Hopefully a reset means that it's ready to start working again, positively. But until then, and whilst we work out what the heck to do, this is the joy of it. Sit back for a moment and let's just give you a flavour of what we hope to experience tonight. Here, Pete is back, and there he is. Pete Lawrence has joined us now. You've made me take on the voice of a horse racing commentator. We were just saying, Pete, isn't it always the way that electronica and linking up and the Zoom universe, it does like to play with you, doesn't it?
That was almost to the second that it dropped out then, but I do apologise.
I think it gave us one of those wonderful moments akin to an episode of The Sky at Night, when there they were, the telescopes were trained at the moon. And yes, we've got the cross wires on the moon now, but it's clouded over again, and there's absolutely nothing one can do. Oh dear, oh dear. So what we did, what I should have done, was talk at the pace of Professor Brian Cox, because when you talk at that speed, the great thing that it does for you is buy you some time. So, but anyway, how lovely it is to see you there. let's just sit back a little now and let's look, as promised, at what the Aurora can do at its very best. Enjoy this. Wow. I feel quite hypnotized after all of that. The majesty of the Northern Lights at its finest there. It will be wonderful if we can connect live to some auroral displays at many of the webcams that we are studying closely. And the slightest sign of any auroral activity, we shall go straight across to them in a newsflash kind of way and bring them to you. Pete Lawrence, it's great to have you with us. As we know, usually before an Aurora flight, you give a wonderful talk and a demonstration of the workings of Aurora science. But it's nice to do that virtually. I think we share the same thing, that our first vision of the Aurora was from this book, The Observer's Book of Astronomy, as written by Patrick Moore, and those wonderful plates, those wonderful artworks by the great L.F. Ball.
That's the one.
That's the first I remember of seeing Aurora. That wonderful image there with Ursa Major, the Great Bear, right at the middle of it. And this was based on a real Aurora that happened in 1961, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. And I do remember looking at that picture and just keep looking at towards the north, hoping I was going to see an aurora from my back garden. You can see the aurora from the UK, but it's extremely rare. But it inspired me, that actual drawing.
It was incredible. And that aurora seen from the south of England, so it must have been extremely possible, powerful, I should say, to reach the south of England. On those very rare occasions, it does happen, doesn't it?
Well, actually, yes, we're at an anniversary at the moment, because in 1989, there was one that occurred on the 13th of March. So this particular date, which actually was so powerful, it blew out the power grid in Quebec. It plunged them into darkness, giving everybody a better view of the aurora.
Good heavens. Well, I understand that there's been, it bodes fairly well tonight, that the solar activity, I was trying to spot it earlier with this little set of solar binoculars here, which reduces the light of the sun to a millionth, allowing, I was just looking out to see if there was any sunspots or anything that might give us, an optimistic sense for some auroral activity tonight. But it clouded over and I couldn't really see. Could we be optimistic tonight, do you think?
Well, actually, clouds are the biggest problem for us, because normally we fly up above the weather and we get a great view we fly up to the north of British airspace and we get a great view towards the north where the aurora will be without the clouds in the way. But tonight it's the clouds that could actually mess us about. But in terms of activity, I'm going to leave that right until the very end of my presentation.
Ah, okay. Well, it'll be close to the actuality then. But thankfully, we have you here virtually in the Zoom universe to give us your wonderful talk, The Workings of Aurora Science. And if anybody watching this, if you have a question, simply just put it into the comments of wherever you're watching, be it Facebook, be it YouTube, all of these modern platforms of the 21st century, and they will find their way to us. So any questions, put them in the comments and our experts will do their best to answer. But Pete, across to you now for your workings of Aurora Science.
Thank you very much, John. Well, I've got the unenviable task of trying to deliver how the aurora does its stuff in 10 minutes, so I really better get on with it. Over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you what causes the aurora, what it looks like, and what are our chances of seeing something this evening. So the story of the aurora begins with this object, which is, of course, our sun. And the sun is a very important object in the solar system. It's the energy source, and the radiation from the sun has allowed our planet to heat, which has allowed life to start on our planet, and our life certainly couldn't be sustained without it. So for us as human beings, it's a very important object indeed. But it's the fact that we exist, or our planet exists, within the atmosphere of a star, because the sun is a star just like all the other stars you can see in the night sky, which is why we get the aurora, which is quite an incredible fact. Now, the sun has a magnetic field, and every 11 years or so it looks pretty uniform, like you can see there. But the sun has a peculiar way of rotating. It's called differential rotation, which means that the equatorial regions go around faster than the polar regions. It takes something about 25 days to go around at the equator and about 35 days to go around at the poles. And that differential rotation tends to twist up those magnetic field lines. So a few years later, from the state you've got on the left-hand side there, you have this convoluted state of magnetic field lines poking out through the sun's surface. The visible surface of the sun, by the way, is called the photosphere, the sphere of light. Now, if you use a special safety filter to look at the sun, because you should never look at it directly with the naked eye, of course, it's quite dangerous. But if you use a special filter to look at it in its state on the left-hand side, you'd see it would be pretty boring, really. There's nothing on it. It's a bit like a billiard ball. But if you look at it or when it's in the state on the right-hand side, you might be lucky to see some dark spots, and these are sunspots. Now, basically, where that magnetic energy is poking out through the surface of the sun, it interferes with the heating and cooling process which goes on in the outer regions of the sun. A material goes up to the surface of the sun, it gets stuck, and it cools down, and that's what forms a sunspot. And there's a close-up of a sunspot. So the photosphere is about 6,000 Celsius, whereas the sunspot is about 1,500 degrees cooler, so about 4,500 Celsius. Now, those magnetic regions are important because they can produce effects which throw material off the sun, and that can head out through the solar system, and that can help generate auroral activity on Earth. Now, as well as radiation coming away from the sun, there are atoms which are broken into their electrical components very close to the sun, and then they head out through the solar system, and as they do so, they drag with them the magnetic field of the sun. And together, those particles and the magnetic field form what's known as the solar wind. You can't normally see the solar wind unless you use specialist equipment, and here we've got a movie from SOHO, the Solar Heliospheric Observatory, which is a spacecraft which looks directly at the sun. Now that's dangerous for it to do, so it has to protect its cameras. So that circle you can see, the dark circle you can see in the center there, is blocking the direct light from the sun. That line you can see there is a support, and the white circle is the edge of the sun. And you can see those dots in the field of view there are stars, background stars, but you can see material flowing away from the sun, heading out through the solar system, and that's the solar wind. Now, the Earth has a magnetic field. It's quite a complex field, but you can imagine what it's like by thinking of a bar magnet in the center of the Earth. And that would have a magnetic field structure around it, which would look like the diagram here. Nice and symmetrical, except the solar wind has an effect on it. On the sunward side, it squishes the magnetic field towards the Earth. And on the anti-sunward side, the side opposite the sun, it stretches it out into what's known as the magnetotail. And that stretches beyond the orbit of the moon. So it's a really long tail of magnetism there. Now, it's a good job we've got our magnetic field around us, because it protects us from the solar wind. It's a bit like shields up on the Enterprise if you're a Star Trek fan. But those particles which are coming towards us, they get deflected around us. So that protects us and it protects our planet from the direct effects of the solar wind. But some of those particles, a very small amount, do make it inside our magnetic shield, if you like. And they get stored in radiation belts around the Earth. Now, when you get one of those magnetically driven events on the sun, that can create disturbances in the solar wind, which can cause those particles trapped in the radiation belts to then head back down towards the surface of the Earth. And before they get to the surface, they have to pass through the atmosphere. And as they do so, they give some of the energy they've got to the atoms and molecules in our atmosphere. And that's what creates the aurora. Whew. Now, as they pass into the atmosphere, those particles interact with the components of our atmosphere. And the main components in Earth's atmosphere are oxygen and nitrogen. Now, when you excite oxygen at the very top of the atmosphere, that gives off a very weak reddish glow. A bit further down, atomic nitrogen gives off this rather lovely blue glow, but by far the most common color you associate with the aurora is this green, which is due to oxygen getting a bigger kick as a higher energy color. And if the stuff coming from the sun is really energetic, it can get to the lower levels of the Earth's atmosphere, where you get the heavier components, such as molecular nitrogen, and that gives off this rather lovely pinkish glow, which you often see at the bottom edge of the green aurorae. Now, the aurora occurs in a ring around the geomagnetic poles of the Earth, and that's called an auroral oval. The one we're looking at here is the auroral, or the Aurora Australis, the southern lights. So that's the southern pole, or southern geomagnetic pole we're looking at there. There's Antarctica in the center of the ring, and you've got Australia in the upper left there. There are two auroral ovals on Earth, one in the northern hemisphere, which gives us the northern lights, or the Aurora Borealis, and the one in the south gives us the southern lights. Now, the best view you'll ever get of the aurora will be from underneath the auroral oval on the ground, because you're then really close to it and it can be really impressive. But the big problem then is cloud, which is what we hope we're not going to get tonight. But for us to view the aurora from the UK, the best way to do it is to head somewhere up towards the Arctic Circle. So that would be northern Norway, Iceland, or Finland, for example. And if you do that and you get a lovely clear night and the aurora is active, it is astonishing. It'll take your breath away if it's a really good aurora. And seeing it under dark conditions, it's no wonder that the ancients came up with myths and legends surrounding the aurora. So you've got the Danish legend in the upper left there, which is of the two giant swans trapped in the ice as they're flapping their wings to try and escape. The reflected light creates the northern lights. The upper right, you've got the Norwegian legend of the Valkyrie warriors marching across the Bifrost Bridge, and their spears are supposed to represent the rays you sometimes get with the aurora. In the lower left, you've got the Inuit legend of the spirits of the dead playing football with the head of a walrus. There's a bit macabre, that one. And in the bottom right, we've got the lovely, I think it's a Finnish legend of the Arctic fox running across the mountains, its tail hitting the tops of the mountains and creating sparks, which generates the northern lights. Now, from Airability's point of view, what we normally do is we get on board a plane, we fly up to the edge of British airspace, the northern edge of British airspace, and we turn off the lights. And we just wait for the aurora. And we've had some great success in previous years. A couple of years ago, we went up with Tim Peake, and Tim's schedule was awkward because it meant we had to fly up when there was a bright moon in the sky. But we still got a beautiful aurora on view for us. Now, there's lots of stuff which can kick off the aurora, activity on the sun heading our way. And one such event is when you get a break in the sun's atmosphere, which is known as the corona, and you get a hole in that corona, which is known as a coronal hole, strangely enough. And the coronal hole means that the magnetic field lines have opened up and are flowing through the solar system, and the material flowing along them can actually kick off an auroral display. Now, at the moment, we have, I don't know if you can you see my mouse? I think you possibly can, but down towards the bottom, there is a dark coronal hole, that darker patch, and that's the one which has come back round and is due, hopefully, fingers crossed, to give us some activity tonight. So if we're really lucky, that's the thing which will drive the aurora for us. Even if you don't have stuff on the sun which is driving it directly by explosions and enormous emissions of charged particles towards us, you tend to get a bread and butter series of displays of the aurora throughout the course of the night. And these are known as auroral substorms. And you get several of these throughout the course of the night, lasting several hours each. And they typically start off with the growth phase, where you get a band of aurora, and then that goes into activity, where you get auroral rays, arcs, curtains, etc. And then it goes into breakdown, where you get patches of the aurora all over the sky, and then it goes into recovery mode before it starts the whole cycle all over again. Okay, so tonight's prospects, well, we have to hope that we have got clear skies. Mike was telling me earlier on he could see stars on some of the cameras, so that's really good for us. And one of the other enemies of the aurora is the moon. And tonight the moon sets at 1810, so that's ideal. It's actually a new moon, so that means it is not going to interfere, which is fantastic for us. So with that, we just have to keep our fingers crossed. If we get any aurora on the cameras, we'll bring it to you live. Thank you.
We are very, very optimistic indeed. Pete, I know that you've seen the Northern Lights many, many times, hundreds of times, is it? Would you estimate?
I would, yes. I've seen it several hundred times, I would think. Yeah.
But yet, is it always magnificent? It's something you never get tired of, I suppose. You would never tire of a sunset. You would never tire of seeing a magnificent rising full moon. And of course,
you never know what you're going to get. That's the thing. The aurora is it can really astound you. Sometimes it can be very weak, just a gentle glow. Sometimes it's really in your face, and sometimes it just bursts into life and it's activity all over the sky. You're never quite sure what you're going to have.
Let's see what we get tonight. We must say thank you to everybody watching us and joining us, viewers from all over the world online, from Bangladesh, from Argentina, from the United States. For you, I will just announce as the Donald, the aurora. It's green and purple. That's no good. Abolish the aurora. It should be orange like I am. It should be orange. Everybody from around the world joining us, from the Philippines, from Portugal, from France, to name but a few. Thank you so much. We're delighted that you are with us. Thank you very much. Questions coming in too. Now, here's one that we can take a look at. How does the ozone layer affect the aurora in any way? And that is from Dwayne Stone King. What a great name, Dwayne Stone King. Does the ozone layer affect aurora in any way?
I don't really know. I mean, it's oxygen, the ozone layer. So oxygen is a contributor to the aurora if it's excited. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I'd need to look that one up.
I think I can probably
I can chip
Oh
in.
yes.
Actually,
Aha,
the
yes.
ozone layer is the main ozone layer is lower down. So I believe it's around sort of 25 kilometers or so in altitude. And so it's below the typical auroral height. So the auroral electrons typically come down to between like 90 kilometers maybe to 150 kilometers is where you get the green lights. So it's well below the auroral zone, if you like, the main ozone layer. So it wouldn't have any effect on the aurora.
Thank you, Nigel.
Yes, interesting to know. Thank you very much, Nigel Meredith. More from Nigel Meredith later in a wonderful stereophonic workshop kind of a way. Here's another question. This is from Tim. If you are directly under the aurora, would you be adversely affected in any way by the magnetic field from the solar wind?
I mean, the biggest effect I think you get is if you're flying at altitude, because you can get a dose of radiation from the aurora, and you have to, if there are polar flights, you do have to bear in mind how many polar flights you're actually doing. But I think it's not a huge amount of radiation. I remember somebody saying it was about the same as a chest X-ray, if it's a really active aurora that's going on.
Imagine if the image of your ribcage was transmitted onto the sky in that way, in an X-ray fashion. Some very wonderful, perspicacious questions from our audience. We're very grateful to you, and keep them coming. Do keep them coming. We love to hear from you, Pete. Thank you very much. We normally get your talk at the beginning of a flight, and it's been wonderful to have this as part of our digital virtual show tonight as well. So thank you very much, Pete, and more from you as the show progresses. Time now to learn a little bit more about the British Antarctic Survey and to find out about the wonderful work that they do in that fascinating place. And we're delighted that Rod Arnold can join us to tell us a little bit more about the wonderful British Antarctic Survey. I remember a few years ago doing a program for the BBC World Service where we recorded messages. Many messages were collected and sent to the team of the British Antarctic Survey to be played at Christmas. And apparently they are wonderful morale boosting things. So what is life like there? Rod, can you hear us? Are you with us? Welcome, Rod Arnold from the British Antarctic Survey. What is life like in such a fascinating place as that?
It's actually, it's fantastic. It's a real privilege to work, fulfilling, and yeah, it's obviously not any job has its moments, but yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, for some people it's more of a vocation, but it's yeah, I've been lucky enough to work for the survey since 1989. And
you're there for weeks and months at a time, aren't you? I suppose it could be comparable to, you know, the 7-month trip that future astronauts will take to Mars. It's that span of time, isn't it? So yeah, that must be rather peaceful in its own way.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk to John Law, who's actually wintering at Rothera this year. So yeah, he's going to be really the team at Rothera will be on their own from very soon until the start of October. So yeah, they have their own lockdown from starting in a few days' time. So yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. The times you can spend away are anything from a few months. If you're there for a summer, you might do sort of 5.5 months, and that's quite common for our pilots to be away for that sort of time in the Antarctic from the start of October till mid-March. And if you're wintering, it's commonly you're going to be away for about 18 months at a stretch.
Well, that certainly chimes in this period of lockdown that we've all been living through. What a piece of context it is to learn how life is at the British Antarctic Survey when you are in your kind of lockdown for up to 18 months. So fascinated to hear more all about the British Antarctic Survey. So Rod, it is over to you, my dear fellow.
Thank you very much. I'll just start sharing my screen and start to tell you about the challenges of polar aviation, really. It's a I'm not going to cover the government has invested quite heavily in science, and I'm not going to cover the new Sir David Attenborough icebreaker that we've got, and I'll really just cover the aviation side to give people a bit of an idea of what it's like. Aviation in Antarctica actually started in 1901 when Scott used a hydrogen balloon to prospect for campsites on the continent, and of course that was his first expedition before the ill-fated Terra Nova expedition in 1910 with the race to the pole with Amundsen. But to put it in context, the first powered flight was in 1903. So yeah, even in the very early days of Antarctic exploration, the aircraft we use, flying things we used to give people a better idea of the observations. So this little clip showing now is the Twin Otter is flying over annual sea ice, but this really puts it in context for me. This was a few years ago, working with the BBC and British Antarctic Survey. The big lumps you can see in that are a collapsing ice shelf. And in the time I've worked for BAS, 9 ice shelves have collapsed around the Antarctic Peninsula. Now, this doesn't add to the sea level rise. The floating ice shelves are already displacing that water. But the ice sheet on the actual continent itself is up to 4.5 kilometers thick. And it doesn't flow off the continent in even sort of flow like icing does on a cake. It's focused into colossal ice streams that focus this flow off the continent, almost like motorways, flowing down from heights of up to 14,000 feet to sea level. And the thought is that these ice shelves might act like corks, holding back the pressure of the ice sheets and ice streams. So that might significantly affect the sea level rise. And in fact, some of the science has shown that this does now add to sea level rise. So what am I going to talk about? Hopefully it's not a rhetorical question. What does the AIM do? Hopefully it covers a bit more than that. And we don't just work in the Antarctic anymore. We extended our operations to the Arctic, looking at sea ice in the Arctic Ocean and the loss of sea ice. But we've also worked looking at Earth system science as a whole in Togo, looking at the West African monsoon. And we've also worked in Bolivia, looking at methane production from wetlands. And most recently, there was a campaign looking at the energy and climate of production of clouds in the Caribbean out of Barbados. Obviously, that was quite a popular trip to volunteer for. And we've got a team of 8 in Cambridge, 8 staff. We do everything from airworthiness of the aircraft, planning complex ferry flights, which I'll come on to in a minute, and also a significant amount of safety management is involved with this. And I guess at the cutting edge, the tip of the spear, are the 12 pilots who fly for us. Now, the pilots are a bit like Arctic terns. They spend the northern hemisphere, northern summer in the northern hemisphere, and then they fly south to the southern hemisphere where they get another summer. So it's really a time of perpetual summer. The terns are doing it for food. I'm not sure about the pilots. I think it's just the job. So the free flight takes about 9 days, and it goes through you can see here, it starts off in Canada. That's where the aircraft are maintained. The lines to the north and to the left, the right-hand side show the path of the aircraft to Europe and the research in the Arctic. But the little dot of lines through North America, through the Caribbean, and then around the edge of the Pacific rim there, show the track of the aircraft on their ferry south to the Antarctic. And it takes about 9 days to undertake that ferry flight. So this is one of our pilots, Vicky. She's rated on the Dash 7 and the Twin Otter. And this is in the Northern Hemisphere. We're in the UK, we're based at Duxford. And this will be towards the end of the summer when we're starting to think about flying south for the Antarctic season. So this is flying south on that ferry flight. This is Cozumel, just off the coast of Mexico. And we fly south in late September, early October. Obviously, it's very nice weather in this slide, but unfortunately, it is during the hurricane season for the Caribbean. So we do sometimes have to either delay or push flights around several hundred miles just to miss the worst of the weather. And also I mentioned the Pacific coastline that we fly down the edge of. Obviously, another name for that Pacific coastline is the Ring of Fire. And we actually passed 9 active volcanoes on the way down on that ferry flight of 9 to 10 days. And this is at the end of it. So this is what the pilots, are going to fly to. This is Rothera Research Station on about halfway down on the Antarctic Peninsula. And the runway is about 876 meters long. It's got water at both ends. And from this perspective, it looks quite a reasonable runway. And the aircraft we use are short takeoff and landing aircraft, so STOL aircraft. But if I show you the perspective from the approach phase, this is the -7 on approach to Rothera, you get another view of it, and it is a short runway, hence the STOL aircraft. The aircraft are similar, and their approach speed at this point would be about 80 knots, both the Twin Otter and the -7. And the -7 carries about, in the real world, carries about 50 people. And to give some idea, that's the normal approach speed of something like a Cessna that you'd see flying at your local flying club. So it's a very impressive aircraft. The scale of the runway, those blobs down the side are actually empty drums, and they're the 45-gallon drums, or 205 litre in modern money. So -7 itself, fantastic aircraft. This one's very heavily modified. There are only 113 built. And really, we're struggling to support the aircraft in terms of spare parts, things like that. So we are currently looking at replacing the platform with another aircraft, but the performance is quite challenging into Rothera's runway. The other aircraft we operate, we have 4 Twin Otters, again, modified specifically for our both science and our operation. And they fly with skis on at about 135 knots, which some people have unkindly suggested you're more likely to get bird strikes on the trailing edge of the wings rather than the leading edge. But the area we work in, this is the pattern of flight lines and depots dotted around our operational area. And just to put it in context, the operational area map on Europe shows that we regularly work out into what would be Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, or if it's orientated slightly differently into Northern Africa. So in an aircraft that does 135 knots and has a range in the Antarctic context of about 240 miles, that's quite committing work. I'll talk a bit more. Rothera is obviously halfway down the Antarctic Peninsula. I'll talk a bit more about a fixed depot that's 400 nautical miles south of that. And that's, on this maps, it's the point labelled Sky High, or it would be the equivalent of Munich on the Europe leg. And that short circuits our logistics chain, because the -7 can fly in there, and then the Twin Otters can operate on skis, hub and spoke out of that. Now, the height of the ice at this point, this ice surface is about 4,000 feet high, and you can see it's billiard table smooth. We do clear it with machinery, but there is very little friction on it, and the pilots use differential thrust of the props and engines to control the direction of the aircraft on the runway itself. Now, the runway is about 1,200 meters long, so it is a lot longer than the Rothera runway, but there is an unfortunate aspect to this, and that's that there's a obstruction at the far end. There's a 500-foot hill or mountain at the other end. So the runway itself is normally just operated with flights approaching from the direction we're looking or taking off towards us. It's very unusual that you'd have the right conditions to take off towards the hill. So yeah, and then the dots you can see along the center of the slide, they're actually the camp itself. So the people there will be the people clearing the runway and managing that fuel depot to refuel the Twin Otters. The reason there's blue ice there is it's quite windy. So the wind scours off the surface snow off the glacial ice underneath. And really, I guess it's a bit like a leftover props from the set of Space 1999 and Moonbase Alpha. But it is much more comfortable than either using the back of the aircraft or a tent. So yeah, this is quite a luxurious piece of infrastructure for us. and it's the operational hub at Sky Blue. So they collect weather data and transmit it back to Rother on HF for the aircraft operations. It's not quite a Radisson Blue or a Hilton, but yeah, you've got the ability to melt water and snow, and yeah, it's a relatively comfortable place to operate out from. So other challenges we get thrown at us more recently, an unusual operation we had to carry out at Sky Blue was the replacement of an engine on the Dash 7. We had a technical problem at Sky Blue, and everything you can see in the picture had to be taken to Sky Blue in the back of a Twin Otter. So the frame was broken down so it fitted in the Twin Otter, and indeed the Dash 7 engine had to be put in a Twin Otter to take there. So we do get, it took about 10 days for this engine replacement in the field. This is the more normal slide you'll see of working in the field. Again, Vicky's in her more normal uniform, I guess this time, insulated overalls. But what you often won't see is the pilots checking the aircraft's tied down properly in -20 with gusting strong winds, and yet looking after the aircraft in the field. So the aircraft in the field, often we get challenged to put in depots to support some big science campaigns, multinational science campaigns. This depot here, as an example, is about 600 nautical miles south of Rothera, and it was to support a drilling project looking at the dynamics of these ice streams and drilling to the bed to understand the properties of the bed of the ice streams, and then therefore the flow rates and changes you'd see. Now, it took us about 4 years to get this on site using Twin Otters, depoting gradually. The drums, is about 270 fuel drums there to support the project and the aircraft operation. And then all the other stuff on top there, there's skidoos or snowmobiles tarped at the right-hand side of the depot on the drums. And the reason all that stuff is on the drums is because it's going to be buried by snow. And the empty drum on the pole, you can see on the very extreme left-hand part of the picture, is what we leave behind to be able to find it again. And that's because this depot's on an ice stream flowing towards the sea, and it might be 700 meters, perhaps a kilometer from where you left it. So the GPS marker you leave with it, you know where you left it, but you know the direction it's gone in, but you won't know exactly where it is, hence the drum on the pole. Now, it can be quite disappointing if you get to a depot and that's the top of the drum on the pole. So another challenge for the pilots. Perhaps one of the questions at interview should be, how good are you with a shovel? So it's not just the flying skills that are exceptional. There's some pretty hard work in there as well. So I guess you're never going to complain about budgeting, catering on budget airlines anymore. This is the catering facilities in the back of a Twin Otter. You've got to melt all the water you use in the field from snow. So whether you want to wash, drink, cook, the rehydrated meals, anything you want to do, you have to melt it. But I can tell you that the cup of tea those guys are drinking never tasted any better. It's absolutely fantastic. At the end of a long day, chocolate and a cup of tea doesn't get much better than that. So we have improved and looked to make our logistics more efficient. And one of the things that was done more recently, within the last 10 years, was look at old technology. So Shackleton first used tractors on his Trans-Antarctic expedition, the one where they were trying to cross the Antarctic, and ended up with the Endurance ship being trapped in ice and the Weddell Sea, and then the heroic journey to Elephant Island and then South Georgia to get the rescue party organised for the crew of the Endurance. But it's not the tractors which are the modern development, although they are modern, very modern pieces of kit that you'd more likely see pushing snow around at a ski resort. It's more the GPR technology, the ground penetrating radar technology. It enables safe navigation through crevassed terrain, and it enables safe navigation. So we bring a ship into low shelf ice at the edge of the continent, and then this pattern you can see here is the offload and the various depots that the tractors are pulling onto the continent itself to support these much bigger programs that we're now involved with. So yeah, and they can truck and drag loads thousands of kilometers from the coast. This is the 4 tractors in this tractor train dragging stuff to a centralized depot. But just to give you an impression of the improvements Twin Otter carries 4 drums at a time, 4 of those 205-litre drums or 45-gallon drums. The tractor in these fuel bladders is moving 220 to 250 drums in one go. So it is a very improved, efficient way of doing it. This is the end of the tractor train. So these are the depot lines. So the wind in this picture would be blowing from the top left-hand corner to the bottom right. And those depots are spaced like that so they don't drift each other. And if I put it in context, that's the tractors build these berms, they build these mounds of snow on which you're going to leave the item. So rather than leaving it to get buried, it's a preemptive strike. So that hopefully when you come back to it, the stuff you left behind on those berms is on the surface, and you can see here a fuel bladder that is on the surface. It doesn't always quite work, and sometimes you have to get your shovel out and dig the tractors out in the depot, but often with these berms we can judge the snowfall such that it isn't too much hard work. And then on this slide here, you can see a bit of a Met phenomena. There's a lower part of a sun pillar on the horizon, a sort of an effect of the ice crystals in the air. Now, I'm going to finish the slideshow really with the image of a bird, but it's not a penguin because penguins don't fly, and it's a picture of an albatross. And you can see on this wandering albatross, they've got a wing that's almost a perfect model of a glider wing. The wing on this bird's 11.5 feet long, or 3.5 meters. And it's got you can see the body's a lifting body. So Airbus and Lockheed eat your heart out. Several million years of evolution beat you to this technology. And the guys at Bird Island tag these birds, and they've measured the distances with GPS trackers and tags on the birds, and these birds can fly at more than 1,000 kilometers in a day in foraging trips. And the furthest a bird has flown was in 10 hours, and it was in a storm system in the Southern Ocean, and the bird averaged 75 miles an hour for 10 hours. So that's 120 kilometers an hour for 10 hours. And yeah, that was all done by soaring off the uplift off wave fronts. So yeah, incredible feats of endurance and distance. And this is one coming into land. They land slower than walking pace, and you can see here the feathers controlling the wingtip vortices, massive air brakes to slow it down. So yeah, I apologise, there's no pictures of penguins in this slideshow of Antarctica, but Dash 7 and Twin Otter is a pretty fantastic looking aircraft, but I'm afraid albatross pips them for me. So hopefully that's a little bit of the context of aviation in the Antarctic.
That is absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Rod. What an amazing place to be stationed. And just seeing you there where you and all of the team work together, there must be some great camaraderie there between you all.
Yeah, absolutely. You're part of a bigger machine. You're there to do a specific job. You know, we electricians, chefs, all sorts of different tasks need to be done, as well as the science. And although you're there for specific roles, you still have to muck in. There are still occasions when the ship comes in where it's all hands to the pumps, and you're pulling together as a team. So yeah, there's always points at which the team comes together, and that's even more so in the winter when they're isolated for that 6 to 7 months.
Must have to be very specially chosen to have such an effective, tight-knit team like that.
Yeah, the interview processes, they're well described. You know, we recruit from all over Europe, UK. The interview process is quite rigorous, and there's a medical examination which you have to pass as well, some reasonably strict medical criteria. But no, it's open to anybody. So yeah, I would, if anybody's got an inkling to do it, I would recommend that they look at the BAS website and apply for an appropriate role.
One thing that might tempt some people, and this is an Aurora show, how often there do you have the chance to see the Aurora Australis, the Southern Lights?
Okay, well, if you were to winter at Halley, which we're not wintering at the moment, but if you were to winter, that's the best site in the sort of operational sphere that we work in. So it's 24-hour daylight in the summer further south, so you won't get to to see the aurora then. But in the winter, I was quite disappointed to learn you still have to get up in the night because it's due to the rotation of the Earth and where the magnetic South Pole is. So Rothera is a little too far north from the magnetic South Pole to see really good aurora. But you can occasionally see it in winter, but it's not as dramatic as at Halley where we were wintering.
Sorry, guys, this is Mike butting in. Just to say, we're starting to get a display live from Sweden. So the dusk is just falling, but just to let Ian and the technical guys know if we could go to
fantastic. So can I say in a new style, let's cross live to Sweden now, where I think we have a display. Let's take a look at Sweden, the Eurovision Aurora contest. Do we have Sweden? We're trying to find the line number now. We'll get that as soon as we can. Oh, I've always wanted to work at a news desk, and it feels like, oh yes, there we are.
Oh, there's
what do you make of that, Pete? Yeah, there's a diffuse green glow coming in there, isn't there?
There is. I've just got to get off my gallery view here to get full screen on there. Let's have a look. Where are we? Yeah, you can just about make it out on the left-hand side, and there's a little patch of green coming in through the middle of the cloud there as well, sort of midway down on the right-hand side. So there's auroral activity, and that's really quite exciting. I wonder how that's going to develop, but you've still got the sort of dusk conditions there. Then you can get a different color of aurora under these conditions as well. You can get it's a powdery bluish type color. That's not a good description, but it basically is called resonance scattering, and it's where the aurora goes up to high altitude and sunlight can hit the aurora, and it can change the energy of the emissions which you're getting. So it gives you a tall column of this bluish color, which would be rather nice to see.
We can see very steadily that is changing, that is slowly morphing. We can see the changing shape. It's developing right in front of us. I'm getting hypnotized again.
Yeah, there's a bit of cloud there in the way, and there's a light illuminating that cloud. I don't think that's aurora. The aurora is the bit off to the right. You can just about see it hiding behind the cloud at the moment, but it is sort of getting bright, and then it's dimming down again.
Yes, it does look like it's at the start of something. Very often the cloud can actually add to the atmosphere. Later we'll be joined by Dr. Emily Drebeck-Maunder from Royal Observatory Greenwich, where we shall be discussing some of the entries for the Astronomy Photographer of the Year shortlist Aurora category. Some of the great images from the past have included cloud because of the way it's altered the atmosphere, maybe added a bit of mystery, maybe given a sense of what it would be like to be on the surface of a moon of Neptune or Uranus. Now that we've got another image there, which is that's a very bronze view, isn't it? It looks like an image of Titan around Saturn, developed in the far, far future. That's an interesting one, isn't it?
I think that's cloud, isn't it, that we're looking at? Oh. Can you see through there?
I'm trying to big it up, and all it is the clouds. We did have a very interesting question here from Mabella, who asks, why do some people see the aurora as green, others see it as grey?
Oh, that's down to the intensity of the aurora. Basically, if it's not intense enough, your eyes won't be able to register the color. So what you will see will be just a grey glow, and a lot of people see that, and they're quite upset because they expect to see the bright visual colors, but it has to be fairly bright for those to come out. We're beginning to see in that live feed there is more of it. There's quite a lot of aurora there now. There's a bit underneath the logo in the upper left corner. Can you see that?
Oh yes.
And the clouds are sort of there's definitely structure over on the left hand side, which is exciting. But yeah, so the camera is obviously very sensitive. That's picking up the color very clearly, but if you were there, you might see it as a palish green, but if it's particularly weak, you'd see it as a grey sort of mist-like fog. There's a bright bit over towards the right now.
Yes, it's all starting, isn't it? I can just imagine the voice of the Aurora gods, perhaps a little like Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan Kenobi, saying, "Let's make the Aurora appear directly behind the logo, just to irritate them."
Yes.
Oh, well, we'll keep our eye on that. We'll keep our eye on this developing Aurora news situation live from Sweden. I'm talking like this because that's how newsreaders talk in an urgent situation. In the 1950s, they did anyway, and that's my favorite tone of voice. We shall keep on top of all of this. Thank you, Rod, once again for your fascinating talk there, all about the work that you do. Pete, I believe in a moment or two, you'll be linking up with another fascinating base, Rothera. I was saying Rotherham in rehearsals, but Rothera, I have it correct now, and you'll be linking up with them shortly, won't you?
Now you've put Rotherham in my head, so I'm going to have to really concentrate and not say Rotherham when I'm speaking to them. Yeah, that's going to be really exciting. Hopefully we're going to connect live to Antarctica, which is, hopefully that link is more stable than my internet.
Oh, it's looking good. It's looking fine, Pete. It's holding on well. It's holding on well. Okay, so we'll go across to Rothera, another fascinating base, and that's in a moment. But for now, let us learn a little bit more about this wonderful organisation who this whole show is in aid of tonight. Let's learn a little more about Airability just here.
Should I put this? Leonardo. Hi. I'm flying a plane today. Hooray.
Blue skies are coming, and we can't wait to get you into the skies. We plan to start limited operations during April, as the regulations permit, and similarly hope to return to full activity during June.
That's great. It's fantastic. Very good.
Offering flight training, introductory experience flights, hoisting into the airplane if you need that help, and also a carer or a family member can potentially join you during the flight. So, if you've ever wondered what it's like to take the controls of an aeroplane, or you are returning to Airability to continue your flying, please contact frontdesk@airability.com to register your interest. Blue skies really are coming. Remember, whatever the disability, we will do our very best to get you into the air, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.
Well, I'm really excited now because I've been looking forward to this piece for ages. We're going to attempt a live link to Antarctica, where I hope on the other end of the line, I'll be able to speak to John Law. Are you there, John?
I am indeed. Hello, Pete, and welcome to Antarctica. Yes.
Oh, thank you. That's absolutely amazing. It's such an honor to be talking to you directly from that amazing continent. Our time is relatively short here, so I'm going to jump straight in and ask you, what sort of research do you do at Rothera Research Station?
So on the station, I'm the Antarctic atmospheric scientist. So I'm the meteorologist. So I'll be looking after the weather instruments as we head in towards winter. So keeping everything up and running through there and sending that data back up to our scientists and our colleagues over in Cambridge. But Rothera is an amazing site because it's got experiments covering everything from biology. We've got a marine team who'll be out checking out krill and the science there. We've got UV sensors. We've got sky observations right up into the upper stratosphere as well, checking out what's happening up in those upper levels. So there's plenty going on. And over the winter, the team here, our job is really to keep things going and to get that data back up to the scientists back in our base in Cambridge.
Right. Well, we're coming up to our spring equinox here, which means you're coming up to your autumn equinox down there. So for people who are working at the station, does that mean, as we're coming up to autumn and winter, that they are stuck at the station basically, or are they able to move backwards and forwards from it?
Oh, that's a really good question. So actually, this weekend is a really exciting weekend for us because it's the end of the summer season. So at the end of the wharf at the moment is the ship, which is going to take the last of our summer team north, leaving just the 24 of us on station over the winter. So that means that we stuck here on Adelaide Island right the way through to about October, when hopefully one of the air unit come back down and bring us some freshies, some fresh vegetables once again. But for the next 6-7 months or so, we'll be stuck on station. We'll be perhaps heading out into the field just up the ramp and out into the science sites there. But really, it's going to be us for the next few months or so.
So that must mean you have an enormous skill set there then, because you've got to cover everything from plumbing to catering to, well, everything really.
We've got an amazing team down here, and I am always in awe of how little I know compared to everyone else. So it's amazing how dependent you suddenly become on people who provide the power and the sparkies and the plumbers. It's great to be here to do some science, but without everyone else making sure the station is up and running, we really would be at a real loss. So it's definitely a nice skill set. But everyone has different jobs. So as Ross was saying, everyone gets involved. And so yesterday, when the ship arrived, we had all of us in a nice line getting our 1.5 tons of fresh veggies just to fill them up for winter. Lots of eggs, lots of onions, lots of potatoes, which we can store through the winter time. But yeah, you turn your hand up to lots of things. So you might be painting the corridor, you might be helping the IT engineer doing some cabling one day. It's amazing what you suddenly find is your job as well to get out. So one of the other things I do is I help out in the BA team. If there's a fire, we go and do some, make sure everyone's safe in that sense. We've also got advanced first aiders. And also out on the boats, there's people there to help drive the boats and get the divers in the water. So everyone's got these different little skills they use, and it's really good fun to try and new things.
That's amazing. Being British, I have to ask this question. What's the weather like down there at the moment?
Well, down here, it's not great for Aurora, it has to be said. It's a thick layer of cloud right across the sky. Temperature-wise, minus 0.7 degrees Celsius. But added to that, the 20-odd knot wind, it's going to feel much more minus 10 degrees Celsius. So in terms of what it's been over in the UK over winter, it's not as bad as it could be. But we are still just about heading towards winter. So we've got on the horizon temperatures of minus 25, minus 30 as we get to the dead of winter. So we've got plenty more time to be wearing all those layers, hats and gloves coming up.
Right, okay. And of course, you must have amazing skies down there because you've got virtually no light pollution at all. So do you get much opportunity to go out and look at them?
It's definitely one of the highlights of winter is this real transitional trend from like 24 hours of sunlight through the summer. So we're just starting to see the night just creeping down to around about 9-10 o'clock or so. We start to see some dark sky, see some stars, finally see some stars back in the sky above Reptile Ridge. And as we're going towards winter, we get these weeks of dawn and dusk, blue and purple skies just for hours and hours. It's great to have an early morning dawn sunrise just around about morning smoke, so around about 10 o'clock in the morning. No early starts, and you still get to see that amazing sunrise. But we've got some really good nights coming up and some really clear, crisp, dark and cold nights, the best nights for astronomy. But there's the Milky Way just across the sky there and some stars. It's a sensational night sky to look at.
I'm very envious of you because you've got the southern hemisphere stars, and we shouldn't be envious because we've got some great constellations and stars in the northern hemisphere, but yours are better down there. And you've got the core of the Milky Way, and that must be incredible.
It really is. It's great. And we're very, very lucky on the British Antarctic Survey Base just to get winter trips. And so in the middle of winter, we'll be heading out in a pyramid tent, a nice orange tent like you see from the Scott and Shackleton days, and be camping out in the middle of the Antarctic and just seeing the sky above us. And it's just dark. And the tent is lit up bright orange. And behind it, that stream of stars, the Milky Way behind it, just makes spectacular backdrops. It really is a very, very exciting place to be in the winter.
I've actually, when you have the core of the Milky Way, it's when it's high up and you've got a really clear sky, it's quite an astonishing sight. Have you ever noticed a shadow cast by it?
Oh, I haven't, but now I'll definitely look out for it. I've got a few things to keep me busy for the next 6 months or so.
It's because you've got a perfect screen there with the white snow, of course, so that should be interesting. We've got a question come in from one of our viewers, if you don't mind me putting that to you. It says, what facilities do you have in the unfortunate case of a medical emergency during the winter?
So during a winter, it's really what we don't want to have is a medevac. So the nearest place to us is the Falkland Islands. But as Rod was saying earlier on, during the winter time, our planes generally spend most of the time up in Canada. So to get the planes back down here in winter, it is a big task. So we have a plane perhaps down to the Falklands over the next couple of years, and that's the nearest way to get to us. But that's still a 5-6 hour flight, not to mention on station, digging out the runway. The runway will get covered and everything back up and running on station. So it is a big ask. Hopefully we don't need it, but we are very lucky in the fact that every nation around us works together. And I have been down in the winter. We have had medevacs out from the pole in the middle of winter. And what's really heartening is that everyone works together. So the operators all work together, and countries and their stations really do support a lot of each other because we are all in it together. So we don't have a lot of facilities, so we do try really hard to be safe and make sure everything we do is just a little bit more cautious than perhaps we would be in the real world. But if we do need to, we can just about do it, but it's something that we don't really want to do.
Well, that's fantastic. It's been an absolute privilege talking to you this evening, John, and thank you so much for the live telephone call. The quality is quite amazing as well, seeing as you're coming right from the other end of the earth from us. But no, it's been an amazing privilege. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me, and hopefully we'll see some more Aurora.
Yes, fingers crossed. Thanks, John.
Such an atmospheric place, isn't it? Rothera. We shall have more from them later on, and also later in the show. Now, you remember some of the sounds that Voyager managed to collect as it passed by Jupiter and Saturn. Very eerie sci-fi sounds. Now, the Aurora can create these kind of sounds as well, which are measurable and which can be audible in a similar way to those sounds created by and collected by Voyager as it went on its journey past Saturn and beyond. It's now way beyond the Kuiper Belt. But the sounds of the Aurora are much more benevolent in this sort of way. They do sound like something from the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. It's a fascinating thing which we shall look at in more detail later. But I do remember the very first time that I ever saw the Aurora. It was in Luosto, in Finnish Lapland, and this was the image that I bought from the gift shop at that time. And I think you never forget the first time you see it. And in my imagination, the sounds that accompanied the Aurora were very distant, ghostly phrases, perhaps on a harp or on a harpsichord in a distant, ethereal fashion. This was what occupied my imagination. At the time, Tony Blackburn was with us, and he says, "Look at that, it's like Rhapsody in Green up there." And typical Tony Blackburn. And you do wonder what George Gershwin would have done with that, Rhapsody in Green. And anyway, all of this just reminded me of, there's a friend of mine, a wonderful musical genius by the name of Anna Lapwood, Director of Music at Pembroke College, Cambridge. And Anna, I'm delighted to say, joins us now. We can cross to Anna now. Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Anna. Oh, thank you for joining our Armchair Aurora show.
It's lovely to be here.
It's fabulous that you would join us. And all this talk of the sort of music that you hear in your imagination when you see the Northern Lights. It brought to mind that wonderful piece you put on Twitter of you playing the most glorious piece of music as the sun rose behind Ely Cathedral, and it was just absolutely magnificent. What piece of music was that, by the way, that you played in that clip?
That was Dawn from Britain's 40 Interludes, but I arranged it. It's originally for full orchestra, so I very selfishly thought, well, I want to play it all by myself, and so arranged it for organ and then played it.
It was so fantastic behind the sunrise of the cathedral there. This kind of music and astronomy goes together so beautifully. And for the Northern Lights, as they dance and sort of illuminate the sky, I asked you if there was a particular piece of music that the Northern Lights would bring to mind. And once again, the inspiration came very, very quickly to you, didn't it?
Well, it was actually from the same series of pieces. It was Moonlight from the Sea Interludes instead. And what I found interesting, as soon as you asked me about it, I thought, actually, as a musician, I have a soundtrack going in my head the entire time. Everything I experience has a little bit of music. And as soon as you mentioned what this event was about, I thought, oh, Moonlight would be absolutely perfect.
And so you have a performance of you playing this wonderful piece of music, which you have allowed us to have tonight. And over the top of that, we are going to place the Northern Lights at their most vibrant as they shimmer across the night sky and fill us all with imagination. And people can see that sunrise clip that we were talking about on your Twitter feed, can't they?
Yes, along with lots of other silly videos of me playing the organ with toilet rolls on my head and other eclectic items.
Yes, exactly. If Sir Patrick Moore were here, he would say, what a fantastic skill that is, fantastic demonstration, not only of gravity, but also fine musicianship. I shall try it when I'm playing the xylophone, although I'm not as convinced I shall be as successful as you were. But yes, it's all wonderfully worth looking. Maybe I should do the rest of the show in a similar fashion. But thank you for allowing us to use this. And it's a fantastic piece, and it brings to mind in my imagination, and maybe everybody else will feel the same way, in the times of Sir Isaac Newton. If Sir Isaac Newton and his contemporaries had seen the Northern Lights, I think this would have stirred in their imagination as well. So Anna, maybe I can cross over to you now to introduce the piece that you played and that you're allowing us to have in the show tonight.
This is my own arrangement of Moonlight from Britain's Four Sea Interludes, played on the organ of Ely Cathedral.
And you can hear this on one of your albums if people would like to hear the full.
Well, yes. I mean, you are all actually having the first listen. No one else has heard this recording yet. It's not being released for another 6 months or so.
And May, well, thank you even more so. I shall eulogize even more with my words of thanks, and maybe introduce it just one more time.
Of course. This is my performance of Moonlight from Britain's Four Sea Interludes, played on the organ of Ely Cathedral.
Well, I hope you were as hypnotized and transfixed by that as we were. Thank you to Anna Lapwood there, Director of Music at Pembroke College, Cambridge, and giving us Benjamin Britten, Moonlight from the Four Sea Interludes, the perfect Aurora accompaniment. And we move across now from those visions of the Aurora at its finest, where the Aurora right at this moment is shaping up just like that. This is from our live camera in Sweden, where the Aurora has seen fit to manifest below the logo, where it is wonderfully visible now. And that, Pete, you were describing earlier how the Aurora develops. Now this really starting to put on a beautiful show there in Sweden.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it reminds me a bit of a Sky at Night recording actually we did on the Aurora in Tromsø a number of years ago. And I can remember it was completely cloudy, and doing my piece to camera, we had the cameraman, sound man, and the producer there, and the sky cleared just like you're seeing there, with this beautiful arc of green aurora spreading across the sky, and nobody was paying attention to me at all. They were all looking up at the aurora and just taking it all in. And that's what we've got. We've got that beautiful arc, which is really bright. You can see the color very clearly there. The clouds are still in the way, but they're giving some degree of contrast against it, aren't they?
Yes, I don't mind those clouds the way they are. There's a wonderful meeting of the earthly and the heavenly. The cloud and the aurora seem to be cooperating in a certain way to give us a little bit of the silver and a little bit of the green against the purple background of the sky. It makes me talk like Tom Baker's Doctor Who to I need a voice to match the majesty. Perhaps the tone of Carl Sagan also would work.
You're never going to convince me that clouds are beautiful, I'm afraid. Being an astronomer in Britain, that's not something we go for. But on there's actually green on the right hand side of that image as well. You can see it behind the clouds there, just sort of coming in and out. And the other green on the left hand side has got wider, hasn't it? So you're seeing a nice sharp bottom edge to it. But there's a little patch just above the logo. It's quite useful, that logo. It's giving us a good navigational guide.
Yes. Now we're seeing some purple there. Is that auroral purple, or do you think that's just the effect from the sky? Perhaps a bit ambiguous to tell if that's part of the aurora.
Where are you talking? Are you talking in the upper left corner there?
Well, the upper right corner as I'm looking at the screen.
Oh, okay. No, I'm not.
There does seem to be a little bit of a purple shade behind that Aurora logo as well.
I'm not sure. I think that's possibly the sky. I could be wrong, but there's definitely a big band of green appearing there now, isn't there? Look at that. It's just creeping out from behind that cloud.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Really, really dancing very, very vibrantly indeed.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, what you're getting there, that sort of beautiful transition in appearance is quite slow and steady as it's going. And again, I can remember being up on the top of a mountain in just outside of Tromsø and looking up at the aurora with a group that had gone with us. And a lady came over to me and said, Pete, does the aurora move fast? And I said, oh yeah, sometimes it's quite dramatic. And just as I said that, the whole sky just shifted with this aurora moving across. I think she thought I was using witchcraft or something. Oh look, there's another bit appearing right at the very top there as well. So it's trying really hard to cover the sky, but there was some annoying cloud there in the way.
Yes, we need the sky hoovers that we've sometimes talked about to get rid of that. It's allowing us just sufficient glimpses, which we're sort of grateful to be able to see something, but at the same time, it does make you rather wish, oh, clouds, banish thyself, be gone.
This is classic aurora hunting, isn't it? It's a bit, I've always likened it to celestial fishing, where you're sort of out there for the night and you don't know what you're going to get. And to be honest, it's mesmeric when you're there. It doesn't matter how intense it is. Whatever you're given, you're just completely hooked by it. And once you've had a little patch of bright aurora, you can't drag yourself away from the sky. You always have to stay there to see if you're going to get something else. And to be honest, the best time to see the aurora, where the most active bit is closest to us in this position here, is around magnetic midnight, when we're in alignment from you through the geomagnetic pole to the sun. That's a single line. And we're probably a little early yet to actually get to the best part of the aurora. So heaven knows how it's going to develop there. But there is that bright blob, which is just to the right of the center now, which is quite encouraging as well.
Oh, beautiful iridescence. Magnetic Midnight. If there isn't a band name whose music is a bit like Pink Floyd, there ought to be, if there isn't. It is very transfixing. It's making me speak in the manner of Carl Sagan, and I have an auroral verse that I'm going to decide to recite at this moment over these images from Sweden. Maybe Tom Baker's Doctor Who would be the tone to deliver it. The borealis lights do danceth, iridescent across the sky. Heaven's lilac, earthy green luminescence. The winds of Sol and our magnetosphere know why. And when the fleeting dance is over, the sky is reclaimed by pitch dark night. Great mystery revealed itself as we were blessed by auroral light. A historic Aurora poem that was written in the age of, 2:05 this afternoon today. I did that at 2:05 in case we needed something for a moment like this. Just settling back there, isn't it? Just, can you imagine just being sat with a good quality thermal anorak in a deck chair with, a nice cup of mulled wine or glurki from Finland, that lovely drink that has fruit and sliced almonds in it. I think that's it. Imagine just sitting there, just watching that. Well, we can do it from our homes tonight, can't we?
Yes, we can. We've definitely got something there. That cloud is in the way, but yeah, we'll keep fingers crossed.
Yes, it's we've stayed with that as it rose and as it fell back. Absolutely gorgeous. We will keep our eyes on those cameras, and this is probably a very good junction now to cross to a great friend of the program, Dr. Paul Abel, theoretical physicist specializing in Hawking radiation at Leicester University. I've got that title right, have I, Paul?
It's far too grand a title, John. I wondered who you were going to introduce.
No, it's not just the planet Earth that benefits from aurora. They happen in other parts of the solar system, and they happen in other systems altogether, around pulsars, for example. Very, very alien images indeed. What on earth could we possibly expect to see if we were to witness the aurora of other worlds?
Well, it does depend where you are, but what is interesting, when I was sort of putting this bit together, I did find that practically wherever there's planets, comets, or astronomical bodies, you can get aurorae. It's quite remarkable. Not all of them are visible to our eyes, because our eyes actually just specialize on a very narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. But still, there would be still bright visual aurorae in this solar system and beyond. So perhaps we should start with Venus, John. This brilliant object. Last year, you remember, Venus very prominent in the skies, and this is the second planet out from the sun. It's very, very different to the Earth. It does have a solid surface, but has a really, really thick atmosphere. And although Venus doesn't have a magnetic field, the solar wind particles from the solar winds that Pete mentioned earlier collide with the upper atmosphere of Venus. And although there isn't a lot of oxygen and nitrogen in the atmosphere of Venus, there is a little bit. It's enough so that when the solar wind particles collide with it, you get these faint glows. So you do get aurora on Venus, but unlike on the Earth, you wouldn't be able to stand on the surface and view it as we did and as we saw in the wonderful cam just a moment ago, because the clouds on Venus never clear away.
Yes, I suppose that's one of those reasons why Venus is called our evil twin. The colours of the aurora around Venus there, they looked sort of a bit kind of grubby, didn't they? Sort of nicotine orange and a darker, sort of more murky blue.
Yeah, I should point out that this is an artist's impression, actually, showing Venus and some of the atmospheric, the commentary-like trail that it has due to particles from the sun. Moving out, Mars, now the planet Mars does have also some aurorae. Again, not like the Earth. Now, Mars is actually currently in the evening sky. It was quite close to us last year. It was very, very bright in our night skies. It's now moving away from us. But the planet Mars doesn't have a magnetic field anymore. Millions of billions of years ago, it did. But because Mars is much smaller than the Earth, it lost its internal heat, and that kind of froze and got rid of the magnetic field that it had. But it has sort of pockets of a remnant magnetic field, and it is that which is responsible for the aurora on Mars. And we can see here some images taken by a number of spacecraft that show this image on Mars. The one on the left is just the normal Martian atmosphere, and the one on the right shows the aurora effects happening. And what happens is, again, particles from the solar wind collide with these residue pockets of magnetic field and excite the carbon dioxide and the atoms in the thin Martian atmosphere to create these colors and glows. But unlike in the Earth, this is only in the UV, so we wouldn't see this if you were standing on the surface of Mars, as I'm sure human beings will do years from now. There wouldn't be much point in looking for the aurora because it's entirely in ultraviolet light.
We'll have to develop the apparatus to view this. Mars, the only world we know, 100% populated by robots.
Yes, yes. Well, and those robots do have UV eyes, so they can perhaps get a better view of it than a person standing on the surface.
I can imagine Martian aurora being particularly subtle and very, very delicate, but just as striking nonetheless.
Yes, yes. And because the solar particles, the solar wind that bathes the sort of the Martian atmosphere in magnetic field lines, then you can get them in the northern hemisphere as well. For some reason, the pockets of magnetic residue of the old magnetic field seem to be in the south, but you do get them in the north as well. But moving out to the next planet in the solar system, this is the planet Jupiter. Jupiter, a very, very bright object in the evening sky when it's present. It's a very, very large, it's the largest planet in the solar system. And very interestingly, Jupiter has a vast magnetic field. If you could see Jupiter's magnetic field in the night sky, it would be the size of the full moon. I mean, it is a very, very large, very, very large structure. Now, until recently, we thought we understood the auroras on Jupiter. They are very, very bright, very powerful. You can see them there in the image. But this Juno spacecraft, which is flying around the poles of the planet, has thrown all of it into question. We're now not sure completely how it works after all. What seems to happen, we think, is that the vast magnetic field ripples away on the edges of in the atmosphere of Jupiter, and this accelerates particles to very high speeds, which, when those particles collide with the upper atmosphere of Jupiter, releases the photons that we would see as an auroral glow. And as you can see, they're very, very bright there. There's aurora at the north and south poles of Jupiter all the time. They vary in brightness from day to day, but unlike here on the Earth, we don't have to wait. We have to wait for a good aurora. On Jupiter, they're there all the time. And what's interesting is it's not just the magnetic field of Jupiter. Jupiter's satellites, the four bright satellites, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, all seem to play some part. And in particular, Io, which is, you've got field lines stretching from the atmosphere of Jupiter out to Io, you get this material that that transfers and accelerates back from Io down onto the surface of onto the upper clouds, and you get these bright spots. And you can see there, there's this in the picture there, they're labeled. We've got the Io spots, and there's also ones from Europa and Ganymede as well. So very complicated aurorae, and very much enhanced by Jupiter's moons. And again, Jupiter is something you can see very easy in the night sky, and binoculars will reveal its 4 bright moons.
It's a wonderful, there was an amazing documentary on the BBC a few years ago called Space Odyssey. It was a sort of a documentary drama hybrid, and it charted astronauts of the future who will take the journey to the edge of the solar system. And the time they spent on Io, they spent a little bit of time on Io, where they were surrounded almost right in front of them with these wonderful auroral effects, almost like light through a prism, which just sort of faded and went, just as we saw in Sweden. But it was around them. Such is the powerful magnetism and all blend of effects. In the Jovian system, I have to say that, Sir Patrick, had to be done. It's the law. And we move further into the solar system now. Where are you taking us next?
Well, I'm not, just before we head on, we're going to stick with Io because you make a very valid point about the amount of activity around Io. Io is a very volcanic satellite, and you've got active volcanoes putting all this material out. And if we could just have that picture back up again of Io, you can see we actually get aurorae around Io, which you will be able to see. And it's not due to Io's magnetic field, because it doesn't have one, but because it's so close to Jupiter, it's traveling through Jupiter's magnetic field. And as a result of that, charged particles around Io from the volcanoes and stuff collide with the particles. It has a very thin atmosphere, very thin tenuous atmosphere, creating aurorae. And the picture on the left shows the aurora around Io. And the first thing you notice is that you don't get bright aurorae around the poles, it's around the equator of Io. And visible to the unaided eye, so not just in UV, but in visible wavelengths as well. So if you stood on the surface of Io, you would have a tremendous view. Jupiter high in the sky, brilliantly large Jupiter, active volcanoes, and this the wonderful aurorae as well. So it would be quite a place to be. Unfortunately, very toxic. The radiation from Jupiter would make it absolutely lethal. So not a place to visit. But moving out to the next planet, Saturn. Saturn has has a very similar aurorae to the Earth. Saturn has a very large magnetic field. It's a property of all gas giants. You've got this metallic fluid in the centers of these planets, and the solar wind again streams out and collides and creates the aurorae at both poles of Saturn. Again, this is not visible. It's not that easy to see visually. It would be something that's largely confined to UV wavelengths. And this is a nice image that's been combined, a UV photographer overlaid on the top of Saturn as it looks at the moment in the night skies later on in the year, when Saturn will be visible. The rings are wide open and you can see the aurorae on there.
Yes, I was going to ask about the colour of that particular part of the aurora of Saturn, a wonderful cyan, a pale turquoise, but that's because we're seeing it in ultraviolet.
Yeah, that's a false color image. It's a UV image. Yeah, you wouldn't actually be able to see it, but our spacecraft can see it for us.
Well, it might be a false color image, but it's very nice nonetheless. Wonderful that the Cassini division of Saturn's rings in that image there, and the alien auroras continue even further out.
Yes, so we recently, last year, you would have seen that. I know, John, you saw this with your own binoculars. Comet 67P, which was we had a comet last year, but this is a different one. In Comet 67P, the Rosetta spacecraft visited it and actually touched down on it. Part of it touched down and examined it. It was quite a brilliant one. Oh, I should mention, I've gone a bit too far ahead. Uranus and Neptune also have aurorae, and you can see on the bright spots there, that's a Hubble Space Telescope image of a little bright aurorae on Uranus. But I think one of the most interesting things in the solar system, if we have the next picture, is comets. And Comet 67P, an aurora was discovered by the Rosetta spacecraft, again in the UV. And this isn't that surprising because comets come right close up to the sun, so they're going to get very close to the solar wind, to these charged particles. And because there's a lot of water ice there that's evaporating out, you can have oxygen and hydrogen in the coma of a comet. So when the particles hit that, we found there is a very faint aurorae around Comet 67P. So that I think is quite a remarkable thought, that even comets can have aurorae.
It's wonderful to see that comet again, 67P, that wonderful mushroom-like, oddly shaped world. If we can call it a world, perhaps it's not substantial enough to call that. I love the image that's available where, just to give a sense of context and size, that comet is superimposed onto the skyline of Los Angeles, and the degree which it dwarfs all of the skyscrapers, almost like Mount Everest or some great enormous mountain. Spectacular to see that in that context, in that scale.
It is, and I think it was a little interesting little fact here. A friend of mine did a calculation. If you were to jump that top right-hand cliff, if you were to jump off that and free fall down, it would take you about an hour and a half to reach the bottom, and you would land very gently because the gravitational field on this comet is incredibly weak. It's a worldlet, John. Why don't we call it a worldlet?
I think that would be rather fun, don't you think? Yeah. Once we've got the technology to visit places like this, the Olympic Games on comets will have all sorts of beautiful rules and possibilities. Alien sport. There was one of Patrick Moore's books, Can You Play Cricket on Mars? Yes. Come the days when we can actually try these things out, will be amazing. Where is our next stop, Paul? This is fascinating. Oh, now then.
Beyond the solar system, actually about 18 light years away. So we come to a brown dwarf. This is a very, very small star, somewhere between, it's a bit larger than the gas giant, but not as large as our own sun. It was one of the first objects outside the solar system to ever be detected with an aurora. This was in July 2015. Astronomers using radio astronomy techniques were able to pick out this aurora on this brown dwarf, which has got the affectionate name LSR J1835 plus 3259. We could perhaps think of a better name for it. But the aurora you see there is possibly the result, there's one or two possibilities. It's either charged particles being caught up in the magnetic field of the brown dwarf and colliding with the upper atmosphere, or else it might be due to a planet or a satellite dumping material onto the star. But you would be able to see it. It would be phenomenally bright. It's because of the hydrogen in the atmosphere of the brown dwarf, this aurora would be an intense red glow, as is shown in the artist impression there, and it would be about 1 million times brighter than the aurora we have here on the Earth. So it would be quite a phenomenal sight. But 18 light years away in the constellation of Lyra, so some distance away from the Earth. But I think it would be quite a view if you could get there and have a look.
It certainly would. The vision of a brown dwarf, those very strange, mysterious objects that occupy that zone between gas giants and stars. To see one of those, that image there reminded me of seeing an eclipsed full moon, or maybe the moon just rising when it is that deep red. Now, I suspect, yes, pulsars next, Paul, is that right?
Yeah, this is pure conjecture on my part, because I have no idea if what I'm about to say is really true, but I like the idea of it, so I'm just going to run with it. Pulsars, the explosive remnants of stars much larger than the sun. They explode, and you get this object that's left behind called a pulsar. It's got strong magnetic fields, and it beams radiation out like a lighthouse. And we know there are planets around pulsars. It's a big debate as to how they got there. No one's really sure why there would be planets around one of the most spectacular explosions in the galaxy, but there does seem to be. And so you would have all these charged particles flying through. So any of those planets that had even a minute atmosphere or a small magnetic field, they would have the most tremendous aurorae. They would be really, really bright, cover a lot of the planet. There's some speculation that there might, even at nighttime, the bright might be sort of like a daytime glow. The auroral light would be that incredibly bright from this active stellar remnant. So I think aurorae will go on. There are some fascinating places in the universe beyond the Earth that seem to have some very interesting aurorae indeed.
They certainly do. The pulsars. I always, in my imagination, think of seeing those images for real, seeing that effect for real. Aurora so bright, so powerful, so violent even, that it would create the equivalent of daylight. That would be fascinating, disorientating, every sense you could imagine.
It would. You would also, again, need to watch the radiation, because pulsars produce a lot of deadly radiation. But if you could somehow insulate yourself from that, it would be one very fine view, I'm sure.
Certainly would. The effect somewhere between the lasers at the ritzy nightclub crossed with some George Lucas special effect. Paul, it is always fascinating to speak to you. Thank you so much for that fascinating trip to the edge of the solar system and far beyond, to take in the aurora far, far, far away, many, many, many light years. Dr. Paul Abel, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, John. Thanks.
A great pleasure, a great pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. We have much more to come. Dr. Emily Drebeck-Maunder from Royal Observatory Greenwich will be with us soon. We'll be looking at some of the entries for the Astronomy Photography of the Year competition run by Royal Observatory Greenwich. Some stunning, stunning images as ever. And myself and Pete Lawrence have been lucky enough to be on the judging panel of that competition. And it's always the Aurora section that we start off with. And the Aurora section is really, although you have the obvious majesty of the vision of it all, it could be said that perhaps the Aurora photos are amongst the trickiest to get right. You don't want it to be too kitsch or too obvious. There's a certain skill to just catching it in that way that the collection of judges enjoy and appreciate. So that is to come very, very soon.
This is really quite a special evening. But we're also here to celebrate Airability, the amazing charity which supports disabled people to fly. So just a reminder really that if you are enjoying this evening, please do consider making a donation. You can do that by going to armchairaurora.com, nice and easy to do, and either go and make a donation or look at the auction prizes. There's some amazing items to bid there. A VIP trip on our next Aurora flight we hope to do next year. Obviously the trip to the Aurora Observatory in Norway, 3 days there, what an amazing trip. Some amazing memorabilia, some signed pictures. So something for everybody, so do please take a look at that. But also you can simply just text FLY to 70490 to donate £5, and we really would appreciate your support. So thank you for taking a look at that. And just another quick point, we've just looked at the Iceland cameras, completely clear skies there, but it's still a little bit light. But you never know, by the end of the show, it might have got dark enough to see some aurora in Iceland. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yes, definitely. Well, coming up next, we've got a conversation between John and an old friend of Airability, Kevin McNulty. Kevin is a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, and he's also a public demonstrator for Hampstead Observatory. Now, the piece they are going to be doing is called "To Future Nights of Aurora Flights." So they're reflecting on Airability auroral flights. So over to John and Kevin.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you. I love the way you described that. And I think that phrase should be said with a raised glass. To future nights of aurora flights. I don't have a glass, but I've got a vase which does contain the aurora colours. Like that, I've been standing by with various props that I can use, either glass or either, sweet wrappers, things like that, anything to create a little localized aurora on the screen. Kevin McNulty, it's great to talk to you. Now, of course, one of the things we are aspiring to tonight is we are looking forward to those days when we can all board those aircraft once again, and we can travel up and get on station, as is the term, to that zone of the aurora where we fly around in that loop and take it all in, see it from the skies. We hope that these days can come back soon. So we thought we'd just talk about that and aspire to it and get a sense of what we can expect. You've been on quite a number of these flights. So how would a typical day of an aurora flight begin? What are the first stages of it?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me here. It's one of these sort of things that you don't really quite know in your head how it all plays out, but you turn up at the hotel, it's registrations and making your way through and finding yourself a table, get a coffee or a drink or whatever at the bar, and you sort of settle down and, lunch is going to be put on, and Pete Lawrence gets up and he talks everybody through exactly what he's put together tonight for us, but in a bit more detail. So it doesn't really matter whether you're an astronomer or already into it. For a lot of people, to see the Aurora Borealis is something very experiential. It can be a kind of bucket list sort of thing, but you really do get a feel of it.
It's nice. It starts off in that social way. We all get together and Pete gives his talk, and one of the other wonderful things is that the guests who come along and join us, and on one occasion we were very, very lucky to be joined by the great Tim Peake, the wonderful British astronaut Tim Peake, who was so generous with his time and his knowledge at that talk, wasn't he? So generosity with his experience.
He was a very affable guy you could really talk to. We were queuing up to board the aircraft, so we were very lucky to spend a good sort of 15 minutes talking to him. I'd actually watched live his spacewalk when Luca, his fellow astronaut, his helmet was beginning to fill up with water. So to actually hear from Tim Peake himself what it was like, to make your way down that truss in darkness with just this cone of light from your helmet. Because when I was watching it live, it all seemed quite calm. But the way Tim Peake described it was like, oh, wow, that was a proper emergency.
Yeah, and it showed his ice cool way of dealing with such things. And it just demonstrated what exceptional human beings they really, really are. Tim Peake and Chris Hadfield, who we've seen a speech of his. And Tim Peake also gave a speech pre-flight about how the aurora appears from his perspective during a spacewalk, looking down on it. Perhaps even thicker, more stronger, more velvety. He described it in a very, very unique way.
Yeah, he did. And, to a degree, I do like to let my mind go a little bit. And when you're on these aurora flights, because you're looking over the curvature of the Earth, when you do see the aurora from these flights, they're not above you. They seem to be beside you or below you. And I was very lucky on an Airability flight to be, when there was a very strong aurora, and it was just like a very bright green river floating past us.
Yes, we see it there. That's one of Pete's wonderful pictures there of the aurora really at its peak, as seen from the aeroplane window. And the way that would begin, the first thing you would see through the aeroplane window is a very diffuse green, grey, sort of almost like a mist. And when you see the start of that fog-like phenomena appearance, and you're heading towards that, excitement really does build, doesn't it? That's when a flight really gets into its own.
Absolutely, because one of the things that you don't have is the curse of astronomy, which is cloud. And you're in very thin atmosphere at 34,000 feet. And so, once that aurora comes out, you really do see it. And, when the plane is flying over Glasgow, it's lights out. I mean, all the no smoking signs, seatbelt signs, everything is gone. And within 20 minutes, your eyes are totally dark adapted. And you really can pick up the colors as the columns and curtains of the aurora rise and fall. It was amazing. It was like a cosmic, demented dancing phantom. It was great.
Exactly, described in the words almost like in a Tolkien-esque fashion. Those very perspicacious volunteers who are out there literally with insulation tape, taping over every no smoking sign until any light source is gone. And yet that usually does happen just beyond Glasgow. And that's when shortly after that, you can start to see the diffuse green, which builds into some of these images that we are enjoying. And everybody on the flight gets into that system, don't they? Where if you're on one side, yep, and you've got the aurora through your window, everybody very generously and cooperatively will get up and swap over and let the other side see the aurora. And of course, on the one side, you have the wonderful auroral displays. On the other side, you've got the most fantastic display of the stars minus any light pollution. So these flights do offer sort of a double spectacle either side, don't they?
Well, absolutely, because as we're heading up to the Faroe Isles, as the aircraft is heading up that way, it's such an unusual thing. When you're normally on a commercial flight, it's so bright inside the aircraft, you don't see that. But then when you look out the window, with all this darkness, you can see a carpet of stars, and it looks like the planets are just hanging there in this sort of 3D view. And Pete, or whichever astronomer is on board, takes you through those constellations, giving you wonderful background of their Greek or Roman history and the tale and legend behind them. And, that is also amazing as well.
And sometimes I know that Pete, the way that Pete photographs these in-flight auroras, very cleverly, a camera is grabbing an image every moment. And sometimes it's rather marvelous when one of those images will catch a meteor, sometimes even a fireball. Many gifts appear in these when you're taking photographs in that method with that intensity.
Well, absolutely. That's the thing with astronomy. A lot of it is luck, isn't it? When it comes to capturing things like that. And of course, with Aurora, you need some luck. You need Pete Lawrence and his BZs coming on stage at magnetic midnight in the bar on board the plane. It's luck. You need that little bit of luck.
Exactly. And we do get that on many occasions. And let us hope that you really conveyed the atmosphere of these flights and what it's like, the excitement, the tantalizing joy, and that effervescent sense of being on one of these flights and hunting for the aurora in that way. One of the other little quirks about these things is your boarding card. Usually it says from Gatwick to Gatwick, and it's rather bizarre. If you try to buy anything in duty free, they do look very confused. They think you printed it yourself and don't they have anything. This is one of the quirks anyway.
It is amazing. It said on my ticket, destination nowhere.
Yes, Magnetic Midnight and their debut album, Destination Nowhere. Let us hope you really capture the atmosphere You've captured the atmosphere of these wonderfully, and let's hope we can get on one of these flights very, very soon. Let's hope that perhaps by 2022 we are in full flow with these again, these Airability Aurora flights, just as you've described. So Kevin McNulty, Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, demonstrator at Hampstead Observatory, you've turned their Facebook feed into a sort of a news desk for astronomy. Thank you for joining us. We're very grateful to you, and hopefully see you on the flights before too long.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed, thank you very much indeed. Let us ask the panel, how are the Aurora cameras? Are there anywhere that we can cross to that are showing any promise at the moment? I'm
oval to expand in size and actually extend over the whole of the UK. I used to live on the south coast. I lived there for about 20 years or so, and I saw it 9 times very clearly from that location. I've got a friend who saw it from Greece, actually.
Goodness.
Oh, yeah,
you don't expect it to progress as far as that. It's reminding us of Paul Abel describing the aurora as seen on Io, where it's around the equator. I wonder if it could ever be as strong as that on Earth. Probably not, I suppose. But yeah, wonderful views there from Sweden. That deep green, it reminds me of one of the images from the Astronomy Photographer of the Year competition from Stocksness, which had that rich green. One of my favorite ways to capture an aurora image, that beautiful deep emerald, so hypnotizing. This gives us a perfect link, I think, to cross now and join Dr. Emily Drabek-Maunder, who is the Senior Manager for Public Astronomy at the Royal Observatory, Greenwich. Emily, thank you for joining us. It is terrific to speak to you. You've been with us for the whole show, standing by. It's been wonderful to see you there. And thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're getting some very lovely images from Sweden there, which could, were they photographed, they'd make good contenders for the astronomy photography competition, I suspect.
Absolutely, yeah. So Astronomy Photographer of the Year, it's the world's largest international astrophotography competition. And so just last year, we had over 5,000 entries from 6 continents across 90 countries. And actually, normally we do get an entry from Antarctica even. So a lot of times it's 7 continents we get entries from. But yeah, we do have an Aurora category. We normally get hundreds of images submitted to the Aurora category. And we have to whittle all of those down to about anywhere from 10 to 12 images that are the best for the entire category. So yeah.
Must be just the most impossible, but the most joyful job to get it down to that shortlist. Now, a sequence has just begun here of some of those shortlisted entries, and my oh my, we can see why. Look at that ribbon of green through a lunar halo there.
Yeah, so this is 2-in-1 Moon Halo and Aurora Borealis by Mustafa Aydin. And so this is one of the shortlisted images from 2020. And you can actually see moonlight being refracted by ice crystals in the upper atmosphere with the aurora in front of it. So it's quite a spectacular sight to see the aurora and this moonlight also being scattered across the sky.
So very ethereal, isn't it? And the work that goes to capture those. Now here we see that beautiful green iridescence and the use of the reflection in the water there, the silhouettes of the trees.
Yeah, exactly. So this is Dance Over the Swamp by Camille Nourive. And yeah, so as Pete was saying earlier, you get this really lovely green color mainly from oxygen that's being excited in the atmosphere. And oxygen can also make a really lovely red color as well. But I just quite like this image because you can see this light being reflected in the water below as well. So it kind of gives a nice mirror sort of effect. But yeah.
Must have been quite challenging to know which way up it goes. It would work either way up, that one, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And so this is Geyser Aurora by Phil Halper. And you can kind of see almost what looks like a dinosaur emerging from a sort of geyser on the ground. So it's actually quite nice to be able to see all of these different patterns in the aurora as well.
Yes, a different type of green there, more of an olive green, perhaps more of a military green with that one. Slight difference there.
Yeah, and it's kind of yellowish. I know what you mean. And we have Hamnoy Lights by Andreas Ettel. And so this was taken in Norway, and so you can see this little kind of sleepy town below the aurora, and again these lovely emerald colors as well.
And the way in that image that the little village and the aurora, they have equal prominence, don't they?
Yes.
And no, almost like a Christmas card here.
Exactly. So this is House Under Rainbow Aurora by Wang Zheng. And so we're getting quite a lovely pink aurora. And so I believe Pete was mentioning this earlier as well. The pink aurora, it's quite rare. It's probably nitrogen that we're seeing here, and it's making this kind of combination. It's a combination of reds and blues that we're seeing, which gives it a lovely pink color. But it looks like something from a fairy tale, I think.
Yes, it does. It's the aurora image, particularly in 2020 with the pandemic situation, was so healing for everybody. And another dramatic one here across the rocks.
Yeah, so this is Northern Dragon's Eye by Elena Pakaliuk. And yeah, again, we have almost a fantasy sort of image here. And so you can kind of imagine that there is a dragon's eye in the bottom right-hand corner of this image.
Oh yes, of course. When you just steady on it, it's it's like the eye of a great prehistoric crocodile, a Sarcosuchus. Now here's a Doctor Who title sequence.
Exactly. So this is Solar Minimum by Bernd Olsen, and so you're really kind of looking at the aurora directly from below it, and so you can see how thin the streams of light are with the aurora, and it almost looks like kind of curtains overhead.
There's a whirlpool effect there. It's got to be very lucky to be in that privileged position. Yes, this is one of my great favorites.
Yeah, I think this is the favorite you were referring to. So this is Stockness Aurora by Ben Bush. And you get this almost kind of alien green sort of colors that stretch across the sky. And again, you can see it reflected in the water below.
Yes, now this was an interesting one.
Yes, so this is Tranquil Spectators by Peter Hocheng. And so this is kind of a different way of imagining the aurora. You're just looking at the reflection in the water.
Yes, this is one of those where in the aurora category, you have to be original. There's always new ways that you have to try and think about it and approach it. And this certainly captured that. The judges admired the inventiveness and the thinking in complete left field with that entry there.
Exactly, and I think that's the key, is to try to think of a new way to imagine the aurora as well. And
oh, now look at the juxtaposition here of the aurora and those great chunks of ice.
yeah, and this image is actually highly commended in the category. It's called Iceland by Christina Nakiva. And again, yeah, you have this sort of reflection, but in this time, instead of water, it's in ice. And so yeah, again, it kind of gives a unique perspective on how we imagine the aurora.
That's another one of my favorites. I think every single image we always say, oh, that's my favorite, that's my favorite. They're so dramatic and they're so just striking. Every one of them is your favorite, which is what makes it so impossible to judge. I wonder if we can bring in Pete Lawrence here as well. Pete, you've been on these judging panels and picking between such amazing images as this. Oh yeah, now this one here, this had a very romantic title, didn't it, Emily?
Yeah, so this is Lone Tree under a Scandinavian Aurora. It was the runner-up for the category, and it's by Tom Archer.
It is. This is where a sense of art comes into it, and usually on a judging panel, you'll know this, Pete, there are the scientists and there are the artists, and this is where the discussions can get interesting.
They can get very interesting indeed. I mean, the aurora is a difficult category to judge because every image of the aurora is gorgeous. I mean, wow, look at that. It's like a waterfall of color. And it's just, you're just looking for that photographer getting that edge to actually make it a special image. That's just beautiful.
So this particular image was the winner of the category last year, and so it's called The Green Lady by Nicholas Vermelt. And it truly is a spectacular image. I think when all of the judges saw this image, we just kind of knew that this was the winning image for the category.
It is, and once again, in 2020, in the time of a pandemic, everybody just looking to that image and an image like that and just feeling uplifted, optimistic, a sense of renewed hope, a sense of a future that you could look to, all of those sorts of emotions and feelings wrapped up into that image. There was the one that I wanted to win the entire thing.
Yeah,
I was fighting for that one, actually. That was the one I wanted.
It was definitely really close. And I also just want to point out that the Royal Observatory, which is a part of Royal Museums Greenwich, they've actually donated a print of the Green Lady, the last image that we just showed, to the silent auction. The print will be signed by the Armchair Aurora hosts as well. So definitely, if you enjoyed that image, take a look at the silent auction, and you could get a copy of that print.
Oh, it's a beautiful one. And those who are signing it will make absolutely sure that they don't sign it in a prominent position. Exactly. Imagine marker pen right across the Green Lady, which it'll be very subtle in a corner. You'll hardly know it's there. But yes, I did. I was wanting that one to win. Pete, which of those images with your judge's hat on were you drawn to there?
That's a very difficult question, isn't it?
Yes.
I think the last one was a beautiful image. I was quite taken with the one with the tree on its own. That's quite stunning. It conveys that feeling of being out in a snowscape all alone in the silence, just looking up at the auroral light, and I rather loved that one.
Guys,
yeah,
sorry to butt in, guys. I have to say, not to be outdone, but Norway is now showing us a good live aurora.
Oh yes, let's see what Norway would offer. That's alongside all of those images.
Line 17 distillery feed, Ian.
Line 17 distillery feed. Yes, they're just lining that up now. You see, Emily, we line up all the images of those wonderful winning shots, and the aurora live at this very moment seems inspired to raise its game. And we shall get that picture in a moment. In the meantime, Dr. Emily Drabeck-Maunder, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for talking us through all of those wonderful auroral images in the category for the competition. Judging beginning again fairly soon, isn't it?
Exactly. So we're already starting our long listing for the 2021 competition. And yeah, judging is going to be over the official judging is going to be over the upcoming weeks. Yeah. So yeah, we have many pictures to go through.
We certainly do. What do you think of this image from Norway coming through there? Yeah, we can see that. Oh, I might get a screen grab of that myself and enter it for the competition. This is building up to something lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I've never seen the aurora live. I've only seen it through photographs. So I'm really fascinated by the live feed that we have tonight. But I mean, if you do get a picture of the aurora at any time, you know, you'll be able to submit the image to the 2022 competition. So the 2021 competition is already it's already finished and we're judging, but 2022, yeah, you'll be able to submit the image. And so it's definitely something that, you know, we encourage everyone to get involved with and do.
Exactly, and the technology of photography and smartphone cameras and such like, the competition opening up to everybody now. It's photography is much more accessible to so many more of us.
Absolutely. We had images from iPads and you know, Android phones and iPhones and various things as well. So yeah, the technology is more accessible now.
In fact, wasn't there one year, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, when I think the runner-up image for the entire competition was a total solar eclipse taken from an aeroplane window on an iPad mini by a young lad who was 7 years old. You know, click, and there he was, he got it, and he was runner-up overall the entire competition. So it really is for everybody. It's, you know, not just for those meticulously putting together composited galaxies, but you can be lucky as well. Click.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a combination of luck and just knowing the technology that you are using. It doesn't have to be really expensive. You know, it can be something like just your mobile phone. And even for our young competition, a couple of years ago, the winning image for the young competition was taken on an iPad. So yeah, you know, it is more accessible to lots of people.
Makes the competition all the more exciting. Dr. Emily Drebeck-Maunder, the Senior Manager for Public Astronomy at the Royal Observatory Greenwich. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for joining us and guiding us through those breathtaking images, and good luck with the judging this year.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Should we have another little look at Norway once again? I'm getting quite addicted to these live feeds there. Look at that. Look at that.
It's you see they're coming and going, aren't they? The visibility of the aurora, which is fairly classic. I mean, some of that will be due to cloud, which is there, but the intensity of the aurora does change as well. It gets bright and then it dims down, and that's actually part of the fascination when you're outside looking for it, because you know everybody's tuned into that view, and suddenly somebody will just spot that little patch which gets bright. And they go, oh, look over there. And then suddenly all the structures will appear in that. So, yeah, it's really quite alluring, the aurora.
Oh, it certainly is. It certainly is. Yeah, some good live images coming through. And we are going to take now a different perspective. We are going to be joined by Nigel Meredith, who is responsible for the Sounds of Space project. Nigel, thank you for being with us tonight. We're delighted for you to join us. A wonderful auroral scene behind you, sir. That's another hypnotizing one.
Yeah, thanks. That's what we have behind me here is the VLF receiver, actually, at Halley Research Station. I'll be presenting some of the sounds that this instrument recorded in my talk.
So yes, this instrument that you refer to is able to capture many of the sounds, the scientific sounds, which are created by the Earth itself. And they do have a beautiful radiophonic workshop type quality. There is the sense of sci-fi about them, isn't there? This wonderful array.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we're taking radio waves here and converting them to sound, of course. But yes, it very much is kind of reminiscent of a kind of 1960s sci-fi movie when you hear some of these sounds.
Yeah, do guide us through some of them. We're fascinated to witness how alien some of these are.
So let me share my screen and let me know, does everybody have that?
I think we do, rather gloriously.
Okay, so fantastic. So thank you for having me this evening. To join your fantastic show. Just before I start, I'd like to acknowledge my collaborators, who are Diana Scarborough, who's a Cambridge-based artist engineer, and Kim Cuneo, who's a leading Australian composer and head of music at the Australian National University. Now, just to give you some outline of my talk, I'm going to start by giving you some background on Earth's natural radio emissions, what they are and how we can hear them. I'll then share some sample sounds recorded by the VLF receiver at Halley. And then I'll talk a little bit about our art science collaboration, how we've used the sounds to create novel soundscapes. Now, our planet naturally produces a variety of really interesting radio emissions. And these radio waves are generated by two principal processes. They can be generated by lightning activity, and they can also be generated by geomagnetic storms, which are ultimately driven by the sun and then have an effect on the Earth's magnetosphere. Now, these radio signals can be best detected by large antennae, either in space or on the ground. Now, the radio spectrum covers a broad range of frequencies below 300 gigahertz, and we use it for multiple applications, including satellite communications, mobile phones, GPS, TV, radio, and Earth's natural radio is at the very lowest end of this spectrum, in the so-called ELF-VLF frequency range, so just to the left of the. Now, the human ear also responds to a similar range of frequencies, typically between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. And this means that Earth's naturally occurring radio signals lie primarily within the audio frequency range. Now, sound waves, of course, are vibrations of air molecules, but these emissions are a form of electromagnetic radiation, and so we cannot hear them directly. But we can take these recorded emissions and convert them to audio files and then play them back as sound. And this is what enables us to hear Earth's natural radio emissions, which we also refer to as the sounds of space. Now, before I present some sounds, I'd just like to introduce the Spectrum Analyzer, which is a really useful software tool that we use to help us visualize the signals by plotting the amplitude of the sound on a frequency versus time graph. So we have the frequency here on the y-axis and time along the bottom, and the amplitude is color-coded. Now, Halley Research Station, which is on the Brunt Ice Shelf in Antarctica, is a fantastic location to record these sounds because it's magnetically connected to the outer radiation belt where some of these waves are generated. And it's also electromagnetically quiet, being far from human societies. The receiver itself consists of two orthogonal 58-meter squared single loop antennae, which has been designed to detect Earth's low frequency radio waves. The weak signals that it detects are amplified, they're processed electronically, and subsequently digitized at 96 kilohertz. Now, at BAS, we primarily use this data to help us investigate the science of space weather storms, to help us understand potential impacts of space weather on the Earth's climate system, and also for lightning detection as part of a worldwide lightning detection network. But as a remarkable spin-off, we can also convert this data directly to sound, revealing these amazing sounds of space. So I'm now going to move on to share some of the sounds with you. The main signals that a ground-based VLF receiver detects come from lightning activity. And each lightning flash emits a short radio pulse, which we call a spheric. And this covers a wide range of frequencies. And these are kind of heard as cracks and pops and appear as vertical lines in a spectrogram. the spherics that we pick up at Halley tend to come from typically come from the Amazon and Congo basins, both of which are over 8,000 kilometers away. So let's take a listen to some spherics as recorded by the VLF receiver at Halley. Can you hear that?
Yes, indeed. It's like a signal being beamed to us with a message that we must pay attention to.
Fantastic.
To decode.
Just wanted to check that it shared the sound properly. So spherics can travel even further, up to halfway around the globe. And when they do this, they become slightly distorted. And the signals that we pick up, they have a pronounced ringing nature and are known as tweaks. So let's take a listen to some tweaks. Now, some of the radio waves associated with lightning, rather amazingly, they leave the atmosphere altogether and they can leak into space. And when they do this, they're guided by, they can be guided by the Earth's magnetic field and received in the opposite hemisphere. They can even be reflected from the opposite hemisphere and be detected in the same hemisphere as the original lightning strike. Now, the higher frequency waves typically travel faster than the lower frequency waves. And the waves that come back have a characteristic descending tone and are known as whistlers. Another prominent signal type, known as chorus, is generated deep within the magnetosphere itself. Now, energetic electrons enter the magnetosphere during geomagnetic storms driven by the sun, causing the Earth's beautiful aurora and generating chorus emissions. Now, these waves tend to be strongest on the dawn side of the planet at distances typically from 4 to 9 Earth radii, as can be seen in this statistical survey using data from 7 satellites. Now, chorus is a really important emission because it can accelerate electrons to very high energies in the Earth's outer radiation belt. And these so-called killer electrons can damage satellites and pose a risk to humans in space. Now, the most common form consists of a multitude of rising tones in the frequency range from 1 to 5 kilohertz. And these emissions are known as chorus because they resemble the twittering of birds. Let's take a listen. Sometimes the signatures are more widely spaced and they can exhibit unusual complexity. And this example shows some rapidly rising tones. Plasmaspheric hiss is another important emission in the Earth's magnetosphere, and unlike chorus, hiss is a broadband structureless signal and resembles audible hiss. Now, plasmaspheric hiss is also enhanced during these, and these waves tend to be strongest on the day side of the planet, typically from 2 to 4 Earth radii from the center of the Earth. And this emission is largely responsible for the slot region, which is observed between the Earth's inner and outer radiation belt. We'll now move on to the final part of the talk about our art-science collaboration. Now, in 2017, we set up an art-science collaboration to exploit these amazing sounds and make them more accessible to wider audiences. We have since used the sounds in performances, including animations, soundscapes, and contemporary dance. We've also used them in short films. and in music. And in a separate venture, I work with Frontier Developments, a video gaming company, to incorporate the space sounds into the space simulation video game, Elite Dangerous. Now, back in 2018, we started work on an album combining the sounds from the VLF receiver at Halley with original music. And for this project, we chose a particularly active period, 24-hour period, to set to music. And Kim went to work with this and matched the day of audio with piano music that he also conceived of and played within another 24-hour period. The resulting album, Aurora Musicalis, was released in May 2020, and it's partly a soundscape drawn from our most mysterious continent and partly a response to the natural radio sounds of our planet. And it invites us to relax, sit back and enjoy the sounds of space set to ambient music on the grand piano. The album, which is available on Bandcamp, comprises 11 tracks which enable us to experience the changing sounds throughout the day, a 3-minute compilation of the space sounds with and without music, and a music video featuring images from the BAS image collection. And now I can invite you to sit back and enjoy some of this music video. So you can sit back and watch the images, or you can close your eyes and imagine you are in the Antarctic with a grand piano and just enjoy. I hope this comes out. If it doesn't, we can kind of transfer to bass and hopefully they'll be able to play it for you. So let's try.
Nigel, that was absolutely healing, therapeutic, beautiful. The fascination of how those sounds are generated, made by the earth itself for all of that multitude of reasons, but yet they sound so familiar. They do sound like birdsong or an approaching high-speed train, that sound on the rails that you hear, and the very subtle music with it, with that background, reminiscent of Q-Burn on a vinyl album, a classic. It's beautiful to combine that human-generated music with the sound generated by the earth itself, rather an ethereal combination.
Yes, it's fantastic. I mean, I kind of first found out about these sounds maybe about 20 years ago, and I used to use them for outreach activities, but primarily myself as a scientist. And it's only in the last, 4 or 5 years where I've actually collaborated with artists where we've been able to take it further and reach wider audiences. And it's simply stunning to combine the sounds, the natural sounds of the earth with Kim's beautiful, ambient piano music. It simply is so relaxing. And what I find fascinating about the tracks on the album is that we chose 24 hours in which to kind of convert to sound. And you can kind of sit back and relax and listen to the music and think, actually, this particular piece was recorded at a particular time of day. And you can imagine, you can think, well, if I was in the Antarctic, this is what I might be hearing at this particular time. So you actually have the time sequence, the diurnal variation, if you like, embedded within the album.
Elgar's diurnal variations. Now there's a title. We are exalted and uplifted. Wonderful. Thank you, Nigel Meredith, and all of your team. And may we hear many, many more ethereal, fascinating compositions such as that. We're getting to the conclusion of our time. I just want to, while everybody's on the screen here, I'm just going to say thank you to all of our presenters. Let's run through the screen here. Thank you, Dr. Emily Drebeck-Monda, Dr. Paul Abel, Mike Miller-Smith, the governor. My goodness, thank you to you for having this idea. Pete Lawrence, Nigel Meredith, Marcus O'Shea on the technical side, Kevin McNulty reminding us how wonderful the flights are, Rodney Arnold, how those pilots land on those very, very small runways. My goodness. We did have a question from somebody asking, what was in those oil drums? What was in those bins, the question went? Were they oil drums? I think they were to mark out the runway, weren't they?
Yeah, so they would have been full of fuel, would have been full of aviation fuel. But yeah, they're then, when they're empty, we've vented them and then just used them to mark the edge of the runway. Really, it's for when the runway's white, covered in snow, because obviously you get sea ice and it freezes at the end of the runways, and it's very difficult to tell where the runway stops and where the sea starts when it's all frozen and white, covered in snow. So they're really clear markers of the boundaries of the runway.
A very good way to recycle the oil drums. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you to Ian Campbell on the technical side, who has been knitting together all of these feeds and all of these interviews and all of these live cameras, plate spinning in a digital virtual manner like you would not believe. I am spooked at them merely trying to take on board what Ian has been achieving. So thank you to you. Chad Dodworth as well on the technical side, who has been knitting all of this together from the outset, really. Thank you to all of you. And to John on the line from Rothera earlier. It was wonderful to hear you out there in Antarctica, and it made me think of Alan Bennett and wanting to say, now, do you need anything bringing? Are you warm enough? Do you want any knitwear dropping in from a parachute? We care about you there. So thank you to all the team. Maybe we can run through a final flurry of questions, perhaps open to everybody, anybody who fancies them. Let's have a look here. This might be one for you, Nigel, or Paul. Do all the planets make the same noises? Certainly the Voyager ones are different levels of eerie, but do they make the same noises, all the planets?
That's a very, very good question. And in fact, they do. And we're going to explore this on our next album. But it turns out that the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, the chorus emissions have actually been recorded on these planets by the Voyager spacecraft. And also, interestingly, whistlers have been detected on Jupiter, also by Voyager, and also associated with lightning activity. So that's rather fascinating.
I don't think just Voyager. I think the Venera spacecraft also detected whistling phenomena in the atmosphere of Venus as they went down, which is one of the things that suggested lightning might also be present in the upper atmosphere of Venus.
Yeah, and I should say, of course, more recent satellite missions have also detected the emissions such as Juno and Cassini.
I wonder if alien civilizations are listening to us and hearing Nicki Minaj or Westlife somewhere in the universe. We are back at another wonderful live Aurora image there over some snow. Is that Norway again, or are we to a different camera there?
That's the Lofoten Islands.
The Lofoten Islands, yeah.
Just Norwegian islands.
Very beautiful islands they are too. That's yeah. There's still quite a lot of cloud around, isn't there? But you can sort of make out the shimmering shapes there. Was that an aurora there?
Yeah, this is one of Iceland.
Oh, right.
And it's just started to build quite nicely in a very clear sky.
Yeah, you can see it right in the middle there, just beginning to get visible on my screen. And it looks like it's sort of striated. It looks like there are sort of curtains there. They're quite weak for me, but I think as it gets darker.
Yes, Emily, there was once a very highly regarded Aurora entry of the Aurora in the daylight. It was visible despite the daylight, which made for a very special atmosphere, a quiet beauty all its own.
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult thing to photograph as well. I mean, with the sun kind of overpowering the sky and everything. So yeah, I mean, the technical things that astrophotographers have been able to capture, truly amazing. Absolutely.
Yes, and webcams now, as we see there, we could make out that building green, that the green was building as the sky was darkening there. Once again, another ethereal dance. The clockwork of day and night and the light that occupies it. We're just looking through some more of the questions that are coming in. A final flurry. Sandia says, you woke us up, but in a good way. Thank you, that's very good. Comment from Louise. This is a bit mind-blowing, even when you are a scientist. Thank you, Louise. That reminds me of a comment that Patrick Moore once said. I think it was on the 700th edition of The Sky at Night, and the Astronomer Royal, Martin Rees, had spoken about the time travel effects that you could possibly encounter the closer you reach the speed of light. And at the end of it, Patrick said, well, I don't know about you, but I feel rather stunned. I think, Paul, you were there for that, weren't you? You witnessed that, and Patrick coming in with one of those wonderful quips that he always would.
Yes, that was rather a magical program. I think, John, that was the first program we ever worked together, wasn't it? We met on a train on the way down.
We were both heading towards Chelsea, and we were both there on the train carriage and heading to The Sky at Night, where Patrick was on very, very fine form indeed. I think he got quite reflective on that program, and he says, well, I'm 88 now. I realise I'm probably on the final lap. I don't have much time left, and so I intend to spend that time as drunk as possible. He never let us down with that. Just looking through a few more questions that we may have had here. Let's take a look. We are running through. Has Antarctica been mapped with aerial stereography? That's from Mags. Anyone got anything to say about that? Has Antarctica been mapped with aerial stereography? My guess is that, yes, it probably has, if I knew what aerial stereography was.
Yeah, I can take that answer. So, yes, the Antarctica has been mapped. We use the aircraft and the guys take images that overlap, and then those images can be viewed stereographically and actually get very accurate mapping and heights from them. So yes, we do use that. The other thing that's increasing in use is detailed satellite imagery. Now the satellites can take very detailed images of the land, but you still, the most accurate way is the photogrammetry, is what they refer to it. And there's a mapping and data centre in Bath, the Magic team, and they map very detailed areas of the continent for science, and science in its own way, because you can map the ice fronts as glaciers recede. So yeah, there's all sorts of information can be generated from those aerial images.
Yes, the possibility of what we can map in great detail now. We think of those images of Pluto from New Horizons. When we all started out being fascinated in astronomy, those of us around about my age in the early 70s, the images of Pluto then, these rather sort of pixelated blobs, and now we have this wonderful detail. Trish came in with a question, which you might want to take, Rodney. What's the lowest temperature that you've ever had to work in? That's from Trish, the lowest temperature.
Okay, personally, the lowest temperature I've worked in is around -40.
Don't.
After that, it gets quite difficult to work, so we tend to retire to the tent and drink tea after that. But yeah, the lowest temperature I've worked in is -40. They obviously get colder than that in Halley in winter, and they get down to -55. So that's pretty chilly. And I have heard stories of people doing a lap of the building just in shoes to protect their feet from the cold. But yeah, there's some antics.
-55. Oof.
That's correct.
Even contemplating that creates physical pain. I think we are at our conclusion there. Thank you to all of you for your wonderful expertise and the generosity of your participation. Thank you, all of you, for watching, and I hope you've been as fascinated as we all have. We look forward to the time of Aurora flights once again. Hopefully that's not too far away. Thank you, Kevin McNulty, for giving us a flavour of the atmosphere of those and what we can look forward to once again. And I think at this junction, let's have a little bit more knowledge about the great organisation and fantastic charity of which Mike Miller-Smith is the governor. Let's hear a little bit more about Airability. Please do support them.
Airability exists to help disabled people change their lives through the magic of flight. Whatever the disability, whether it's a young person with autism or a wounded soldier, perhaps somebody with Alzheimer's even, or an acquired disability or medical condition, we give everybody the chance to participate and to fly with our specially adapted aircraft and equipment such as the hoist, which can safely lift somebody into the pilot seat to take the controls for the first time.
The one thing that's fantastic about Aerobility is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
When I'm up there, just another voice on the radio, and that's all I want to be, just another voice. And Aerobility has enabled that completely.
They gave me that purpose back, they gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
Time is tough for everybody right now, but if you can help, please do. Through your support, we can continue to change lives and support disabled people through the magic of flight. Thank you.
I am happier.
I am more confident.
I am feeling positive about my life.
Thanks to Airability.
And thank you to you.
Wow.
Wonderful information from Airability there. Please do support them. We're going back to the Aurora live once again. Look at that. Look at the green just building up just above that, that horizon line there, the mountains, the hills, and a lovely Aurora
There's a
building
ray
up there.
forming there. Can you see the ray? There it is. Yeah. There's a little patch of it.
Now that must be strong to come through that level of daylight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been an exciting one. There it goes. So with the ray, you're sort of getting these overlapping bits of aurora.
It's fabulous to see it live like this. It gives you the indication as to how it actually does move and dance in the sky. Many of the sequences we see, it's perhaps speeded up, but here happening naturally like that. Like just blowing a smoke ring, very delicate, just a waft.
And it just shows what a magical place the sky is. I think for those people with disabilities that don't get to do sometimes amazing things that everybody else gets to do on the same playing field. So to be able to take the controls of an airplane, be in charge of your own destiny and do something amazing, to have the responsibility of flying an airplane and the confidence that gives you, and to see the world from a new perspective is truly amazing. And I can think of no better analogy than when we sit here together and see this building Aurora, which is just getting better and better all the time. So somebody's smiling on us tonight. Those of us that have stuck with us to the end, this is really quite a highlight, isn't it? But once again, thank you for joining us tonight. And please do consider supporting Airability. Go to armchairaurora.com, go to the donation page, just make one bid. There's a real lovely spectrum of items there, including a visit to the amazing Aurora Observatory. Come and fly with us in the future. Some amazing items, including Emily's book and the winning picture from the competition we spoke about earlier. So some amazing things. Do bid, text to donate, or just go to the Just Giving page through the link. But yeah, this is just fabulous, isn't it? And help us to do amazing things like this. Disabled people sometimes are in lockdown all of their lives. I think all of us have experienced what it's like to be in lockdown and to be isolated. That's a great analogy for what it can be for a disabled person. So by doing things like this together, we really can literally light up lockdown and light up disability.
Yes, absolutely, Mike. You must have seen some wonderful effects from those who have been given the chance to fly an aircraft when they probably never imagined that they ever would. And the effect that has on them, a renewed confidence or a renewed sense of possibility and amazement. You must have seen some transformational things in your time with Airability.
I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it does genuinely help you to see the world with new eyes. And I think, you know, the capability it gives you, the teamwork it gives you, the learning to take responsibility and just opening your eyes to what you can do, not what you can't do, has so many analogies. You know, it's not just about the flying. If I can fly, what else can I do? It helps people ask that question. And, you know, an airplane is a great tool to do that. And the sky is an amazing place to do that, as we've seen this evening.
That's a lovely way to think of it, isn't it? If I can do this, then what else can I do? It's just like kicking the door down and entire new possibilities, renewed, uplifted confidence. Lovely way to look at it. So I think we are probably at our allotted time just now. Once again, thanks to everybody who's been part of the show tonight. Thank you to Anna Lapwood too for that wonderful Benjamin Britten recital over that wonderful Aurora sequence earlier on. Join us on a flight in the future. We'll install a pipe organ at the front of the plane for you to do the same thing. So thank you to everybody. Let me just run through the names as I see them. Chad Dodsworth, Ian Campbell, Nigel Meredith, Marcus O'Shea, Kevin McNulty, Rodney Arnold, Pete Lawrence, Mike Miller-Smith, Emily Trebek-Maunder, Paul Abel, and John on the telephone line there, as if it's phone a friend on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Thank you, all of you, for being part of Armchair Aurora, and to everybody watching at home for your very perspicacious, challenging questions as well. We've loved every moment of it. Until soon, let us hope that we are back in the skies once again, seeing these breathtaking aurora effects. And I shall I shall close as Sir Patrick Moore would. From the Armchair Aurora time, until next time, from all of us here, good night.